Chapter 291. The Golden King lowered his head, closed his eyes, and rubbed his forehead for a long time. He did not hear anything for a long time and felt strange. When he looked up, he could not help but laugh. The other four emperors did the same thing. Ahem. The Golden King coughed and broke the silence. I heard the Saintess say that she is unfilial, but as far as I know, the Saintess was taken away by the Red Disaster. She had no choice, so how is that unfilial? The Golden King decided to change the topic. He did not have much hope about the weakness of the Red Disaster. Back then, after witnessing Brother Long's strength with his own eyes, the third prince felt that there should not be any way to easily defeat him. Emperors, to be honest, Stias said, I have been by Jilin's side for a long time. Although I was indeed taken away, half of it was of my own free will. Yes, if not, the Saimai Empire would have fought with the Red Disaster long ago. How could I let my precious daughter fall into the hands of that evil dragon and not do anything about it? The Shengming King testified for his daughter. The other emperors looked at each other and nodded slowly. They believed that part of the reason Stia had been by the Red Disaster's side for so many years was of her own free will. As for the Shengming King's harsh words, they would not believe it. None of the emperors present would lead the entire empire to fight with the enemy just because their daughter had been taken away. That matter involved hundreds of millions of people and thousands of lives. They could not let so many people die with just one person and gamble with the fate of the empire. As an emperor, there was no such thing as being willful. If there was, he probably would not have lived a good life. The Shengming King thought that the reason he said this was purely out of love. The emperors could understand, so no one exposed him. Then why is the Saintess willing to stay by the Red Disaster's side? What is the Saintess's intention? The one who spoke was the Golden King again. Among the people present, other than the Shengming King, only he and Stia had an ill-fated relationship and were relatively familiar with each other. Also, he believed in Stia's words the most. Back then, before he ascended to the position, he would often visit Jilin and the others' lakeside courtyard. He really couldn't tell that Stia was unwilling or uncomfortable at that time. It really didn't look like he had been caught. She was more like a big sister in the family, bossing people around all day long, pointing at them and saying that they couldn't watch this or that. She even lectured Brother Long from time to time, almost pointing at his nose and scolding him. Therefore, when Stia said that she was willing to stay by Brother Long's side, the third prince believed her 120 times. It's a long story, Stia said. Please make it shorter, the Iron Blood King said. He hated long speeches. The other emperors could not help but glare at the Iron Blood King. After all, this was related to the Red Disaster. Perhaps it was just some trivial matters, but perhaps there was some important information that was accidentally revealed. Make it shorter. The Iron Blood King did not like long speeches. The other emperors knew this too, but they all secretly thought that the Iron Blood King was just jealous because he did not have the ability to make long speeches. Okay, Stia answered straightforwardly. When I first met Jilin, I think everyone knows what time it was. When I saw him, I felt very strange. What was strange about him? The Sacred King asked. Father, although he was already extremely powerful back then, as terrifying as a demon, his intelligence did not seem to match his power, Stias said. Really, the Golden King could not help but frown. When he first met Brother Long, he did not feel that there was anything wrong with his intelligence. Instead, they chatted happily and even drank together. Later, when he was courting the Empress, he even gave him advice. No wonder it was so difficult for him to court the Empress. Was it because Brother Long was retarded? Golden King looked like he was suddenly enlightened, as if he had figured out something in a moment. The other emperors looked at him with admiration, thinking that this new Golden King was not any worse than his father. He was young, but he was really impressive. That's right. Stia did not notice this, and said to herself, at that time, Jilin only had the intelligence of a 7- or 8-year-old child. This should have a lot to do with him growing up alone. He did not have much experience in the world. Although he was invincible, his intelligence did not grow. Then why did you stay by his side willingly? The War King asked. I did it to influence him. Stia said, Jilin's intelligence was like a child's back then, so I had this idea. I thought that if I could influence him with human civilization, teach him etiquette, civilization, and principles, and if he could accept the thoughts of the human race, I might be able to influence him from the witches and make him stand on our side. This way, it would be the best of both worlds. So I started to teach Jilin how to read and write and understand the principles of the human race. Everyone present couldn't help but gasp when they saw Staya. They thought to themselves, this saint of light is so bold. Not only does she not care that she's been captured, but she even wants to tame the Red Disaster. No wonder so, that's why. The Iron Blood King rubbed his chin and nodded, deep in thought. When he first saw Jilin in the moving city, he felt that the idiom of the dragon was too good and sounded a little strange. At that time, he was not the only one who thought so. Now, he was sure that it was the Saint of Light Church. Teaching the dragon, the Red Disaster, to read and write, it must be very difficult, right? It must be hard for the saint, the Golden King said, full of emotion. Education without discrimination had always been the principle that the Middle Empire respected, but he did not expect Staya to take it to the extreme. Not at all. Staya shook her head. The dragon's talent is indescribable. He only used the human language for less than 4 hours, and he completely mastered it. As for reading, it's normal for him to have a photographic memory. Our human race can only watch from the dust. So, the saint's education is remarkable, the Golden King said. Steve fell silent and slowly shook his head. He thought to himself that if his education was truly remarkable, how could the series of events that followed have happened? I'm ashamed to say that although I'm the Saint of Light in the Church of Light and have the duty of spreading the teachings, I only know how to follow the script and not be flexible. I ignored the fundamental difference between Jilin and the human race, and finally made a big mistake. I didn't teach him well. I told Jilin that the strong should protect the weak. But Jilin has always firmly believed that the weak are prey to the strong. I taught Jilin that humans should restrain themselves and not indulge in their desires, but I was laughed at. Jilin said that humans are the most indulgent creatures. I said that all life should be equal, and we shouldn't kill other life. It was rare for Jilin to agree with me, but he said that humans had killed more lives than all the other creatures combined. Dragons are life, humans are life, pigs, dogs, cows, and sheep are also life. I was speechless. I also told Jilin that the Chosen One should take the world as his responsibility and worry about the world first. Jilin said that what I said made sense. He also said that the beastmen, dwarves, and magical beasts all care about the world, and we can worry for them. Humans don't have to. They're living quite well. The various emperors clenched their teeth when they heard this. They thought that what she taught was good stuff, but why was the outcome so tragic? Saint, you said that you stayed by Red Disaster's side willingly. You stayed by his side to educate him, but now that you're back. The Hero King didn't speak for a long time, and finally couldn't help but speak. I give up, I admit defeat. Staya sighed. What happened? The Shengming King asked. Jilin, he has completely matured. Although it hasn't been long, with his current intelligence, he's not weaker than any human. I can't teach him anymore. Also, his hostility towards humans has already taken shape, and it's hard to change it. Staya's heart was filled with regret. How can this be? The Shengming King didn't understand. He knew that his daughter wasn't ordinary. She was able to become the Saint of Light not only because she was his daughter, but also because she was the eldest princess of the Saimite Empire. Staya was born with the power to influence others. When she wholeheartedly preached the teachings of the God of Light to the people, even the emperor himself was convinced. The people were completely influenced. They were moved to tears. People like her were born to be leaders, and they were born to inspire others. Their words and actions were like light, illuminating others and dyeing others with their colors. It was impossible for such a person to be helpless against an inexperienced dragon. It's Aisha, right? The Pope suddenly spoke. His voice was low, and he was rarely serious. Staya nodded. You're right, Your Holiness. The Shengming King's eyes suddenly lit up. So that's why Aisha has always been by the Red Disaster's side. It must be that witch's doing. Staya was the saint of light, but Aisha had completely inherited the witch's legacy, and she had lived for at least 200 years. Staya was naturally inexperienced in front of such an old monster. Also, even for Staya, it wasn't easy to teach people to be good. However, for Aisha, it was just a matter of words and actions. Things were always like this. We already understand the Red Disaster's true attitude, the War King said. However, I believe that the Saint of Light came back in such a hurry because she wanted to say more than that. Just now, the Saint said that the Red Disaster wants to worry for the other races. What does he want to worry about? The War King clearly grasped the main point. Yes, I want to say more than that, Staya said. Before I came back, I already knew that Jilin is planning a great war. He wants to lead the other races to declare war on the human race. Therefore, I took the initiative to negotiate with him on behalf of all of you. He made a condition. What condition? Everyone was energized. As long as they could negotiate, there was still room for discussion. Other than the Iron Blood King, they were all good at this. They were afraid that this dragon didn't understand human language, so there was no way to negotiate. Give half of the human territory to the other races. Staya said. What? The emperors felt like they didn't quite understand. Or rather, they understood, but didn't dare to believe it. Jilin said that he will give half of the Divine Dragon Empire, Nanshin Empire, and Saimai Empire to him. Staya said clearly this time, but she purposely skipped the part where Jilin wanted to give her face. The 5 emperors looked at each other. This condition was equivalent to not mentioning it. In other words, they had to fight the Red Calamity. There was no room for negotiation. They understood as soon as they heard this. This kind of trick was left over from their early years. They were all too familiar with it. Did the Red Calamity mention when the war will start? The Iron Blood King asked. No. Staya shook her head. Since that's the case, then there's nothing to say. Everyone can't rely on luck. We have to speed up. Golden King. The Iron Blood King was very decisive. After saying that there was nothing to say, he really didn't say anything. After saying that, he turned off the projection. He didn't even see the Golden King nod at him. Seeing this, the Hero King hurriedly cupped his hands and turned off the projection. I'll send a battle spear to you now. The War King left after saying that. It seemed like he wasn't lying when he said that this thing consumed a lot of resources. Although the emperors were rich, they weren't willing to waste a single cent on it. In the blink of an eye, only the people from the Middle Empire and the Saimai Empire were left in the study. The Golden King still had a lot to say to Staya. However, he was still a wise emperor who grew up in a brothel. He was still very perceptive. He looked left and right. He wanted to leave the study to the Shengming King and his daughter while he walked out. However, he was stopped by Staya. Your Majesty, the Golden King, please wait. The Golden King turned around and said with a smile, Miss Chen, what's the matter? Staya couldn't help but smile. Third young master, may I ask if most of your brothers are doing well? The third prince frowned. Beside him, the sword saint shot out sword energy. What do you mean? Most of my brothers are doing well. Staya was stunned. She walked to the third prince and whispered, Jilin didn't do anything to them? Then how did you get to the throne? Brother Long, didn't Brother Bei tell you? Staya thought to herself, I was dead before you got to the throne. There were too many things that happened after I was alive. Neither of them had the time to tell me. Something happened. They didn't tell me. Oh, the third prince told Staya the details of what happened that day. Staya was shocked too. She didn't expect Jilin to help the third prince get to the throne so blatantly and directly participate in human affairs. This was even more crude and blunt than Jilin's idea of killing all the other princes. Only Bane and Jilin would do something like this. If that's the case, I won't disturb your reunion with my father. We can talk about other things in the future. The third prince was about to leave again. Wait, what's the matter? It's rumored that the emperor of the Middle Empire has 3 palaces, 6 courtyards, and 72 concubines. Is it true? It's not true. There aren't that many. Then how many do you have? The Golden King of each generation is different. There's no fixed number, but there should be at least a few dozen. How many does the third prince have? This. What do you mean, Miss Chun? Nothing. I just want to ask, who is the current empress of the Middle Empire? Has she been bullied in the palace? Ah. The third prince looked up and laughed. He understood what Staya meant. Thank you for your concern. Thanks to all the good fortune back then, the current empress is Xueqing. As for being bullied, that's just a joke. The empress of the Middle Empire, the mother of the world, is in charge of the harem. In the harem, her words are law. She means what she says. Who dares to bully her? Staya cupped her hands and bowed in a Middle Empire salute. The third prince didn't forget his original intention. He deserves respect. Congratulations to the third prince for finally getting what he wanted. Lovers finally get married. When she helped the third prince pursue Xueqing, Staya and Xueqing had the best relationship and were the most talkative. Now that Staya had returned to the capital, although she had a lot of important things to take care of, according to her personality, she would ask about Xueqing no matter what. Now that she heard the result, she was very happy. Although most things in the world didn't go as planned, people often said 9 out of 10 things in life don't go your way. But in the end, there were 2 things that were in line with one's heart. It was these things that made the world more pleasing to the eye. Chapter 292. Staya watched as the third prince walked out of the royal study. When she turned around, she saw the Pope looking at her eagerly. He was a legendary figure who was more than 200 years old, except for his white hair. There were no traces of age on his body, and his face was as smooth as a 16 or 17-year-old boy's. This kind of person made a young girl like Staya feel uncomfortable. What is it, Your Highness? Staya tried to hide her discomfort. This. The Pope stuttered, which was rare. That? Is Aisha still with the Red Disaster? No. Then where did she go? Is she okay? I don't know. I separated from them for a while. When we met again, Aisha was gone. Jilin and Bane don't know where she went either. As for whether she's okay, Your Highness, you don't have to worry about it. This. The Pope's expression was a bit gloomy. Staya's words meant nothing. There was still no news about Aisha. They didn't even know if she was okay. Your Highness! Staya shouted. What? The Pope was shocked and looked up. What is your relationship with Aisha? As the Pope of the Church of Light, Staya was furious when she saw the Pope's dazed look. He opened his mouth with righteous indignation, but he didn't know how to continue. I have nothing to do with her. The Pope spread his hands and looked innocent. Staya's eyes twitched. Honesty was the creed of the Church of Light. But as the Pope of the Church of Light, he actually lied so obviously. This was shameless. Staya looked at the Pope and gritted her teeth. How did this kind of person become the Pope? Father, when are we going back? I want to see my mother, Staya turned and asked. Good child. The Sacred King grabbed Staya's hand and patted it gently. Don't worry, we still have some things to do in the Middle Empire. We'll leave as soon as we're done here. What are we doing in the Middle Empire? Staya was stunned. In order to fight against the Red Disaster, the Middle Empire came up with a plan. This plan requires all of our emperors to be present. Therefore, we can't leave for the time being, said the Shengming King. We have a way to deal with Jilin. What is it? Staya widened her eyes in shock. To be honest, I don't really want to tell you about this because it does sound like a fantasy story. Even I don't really believe it now. The Shengming King was a little hesitant. The specific details and methods are all one-sided statements from the Middle Empire. There is no evidence. I'm not too sure if it will work. However, since we have no other choice, why not give it a try? Don't you agree? What is it? Staya asked. The Middle Empire calls it the Human Emperor Plan, said the Shengming King. Human Emperor Plan? Staya frowned. This name did not sound reliable. What is the Human Emperor? Please enlighten me, Father. The Human Emperor is the emperor of the human race, the master of all humans. He bears the power and fate of all humans. His every move is unstoppable. He can represent the human race and talk to the gods. In other words, he is a godlike person. The power of all humans will be concentrated on him, right? Staya could always grasp the main point accurately. It's not that simple, the Pope said suddenly. His face was unfathomable. However, you can understand it this way. There's nothing wrong with it. Staya rolled her eyes at the Pope. She thought he had some good ideas, but it turned out to be nonsense again. Human Emperor, who is the candidate? Is there already one? Is it you, Father? Or the warlord? Staya asked a few questions in a row. From the frequency of her words, it was obvious that she was anxious. However, this was inevitable. After all, he was the master of all humans. Looking at the power and territory of humans now, it was not an exaggeration to say that he was the king of the world. This kind of person was meant to control the world. He could do whatever he wanted with a flip of his hand. They had to be very careful. Otherwise, if something went wrong, this human emperor might become a disaster no less than Jilin. As for the candidates for the human emperor, Staya subconsciously mentioned two people. One was her father, and the other was the warlord. Staya thought that her father, with the name of the Shengming king, was a truly wise king. He was the best candidate to be the master of all humans. However, considering that the human emperor was chosen to fight with Jilin, it seemed that the warlord was more suitable. After all, he was the most powerful person of the human race. Ha! The Shengming king smiled and shook his head. The candidate has already been decided. However, it's not me, nor is it the warlord. It's the Golden King. Who? Staya was shocked. She thought that she had misheard. The Golden King, the Shengming king repeated. This, Staya stared at the Shengming king with wide eyes. It was the first time that she was so helpless. She was completely confused. Let the third prince fight with Jilin. Which idiot thought of this plan? Was it the third prince's brother? Did they want to kill the third prince and take the throne for themselves? The fate of the human race depended on this battle. What did they want to do? Cut off the human race's heritage? Slay the dragon. The third prince, this is not something you should do, right? You are as gentle as jade, and your face is like the spring breeze. A person like you should be wearing a plain long robe, standing on the second floor of a brothel, drinking wine and looking at the sky, hugging a beauty and sighing about the loneliness of life. This suits you. Fight with Jilin this. Staya felt as if he had been struck by lightning. It really felt as if 10,000 war horses had galloped past him. He was so confused that he couldn't control himself. After this for a long time, he finally said, "This Golden King has no strength to truss a chicken. How can he fight with Jilin? As far as I know, the Golden King has never fought with anyone himself. He doesn't know how to fight." That's true. After all, he was a member of the royal family of the Middle Empire. Naturally, he didn't have to fight with anyone himself. I didn't expect that his first opponent would be such a thing. The royal family of the Middle Empire, the descendant of the Li family, is indeed extraordinary. The Pope sighed. He seemed to be sighing, but if you looked closely, you would see that he didn't care at all. His voice sounded like he was gloating. "Your Highness the Pope." Staya finally couldn't take it anymore. This is the most important thing in the world. It concerns the people of the world. How can you be so childish? So what if it's childish? So what if I'm serious? The Pope looked at Staya with a smile on his face. Staya suddenly froze. She was very familiar with the attitude contained in these two sentences. It was the attitude of a bystander. No matter how the world changes, how unpredictable it is, it has nothing to do with me. The waves on the sea are turbulent, the rain is sparse, and the wind is strong. I'll just stand by the sea, laugh and curse, drink tea, and watch the show. So what if I'm serious? He's so similar to Aisha. Staya suddenly felt that the Pope and Aisha were really similar. But on second thought, this kind of resemblance might be normal. Because in this world, there were only two humans who had lived over 200 years old. If living for 200 years could still be counted as a human, no third person could imagine what they had gone through. They had witnessed the passing of all their family and friends, and the replacement of 2 or 3 generations. Maybe because of this, they deliberately put themselves in the position of a bystander. No matter what, nothing in the world would make them happy or sad. If the world was said to be a mortal world, then Aisha and the Pope had already walked out of it. No wonder they were so careless in such a big matter, Staya understood. The anger in her heart dissipated. Staya looked at the Pope and called seriously, "Your Highness." "What is it?" Staya was so serious that the Pope was stunned. I suddenly have a feeling. I don't know if I should say it. The Pope looked left and right. Finally, he looked at Staya and said, "There are no outsiders here. Saintess, you can say it. I want to say Your Highness and Aisha are really a good match." "Are you serious?" "Really, you are indeed the Saintess of the Light. You have such good taste." "Your Highness." "Ah, you are indeed a person cultivated by the Church of Light. Honest. You are so honest." "Your Highness, what is your relationship with Aisha?" The Pope suddenly stopped fooling around. He looked at Staya. In the end, he didn't say anything and walked out silently. He couldn't say anything about this. He didn't want to make up a lie. He could only walk away silently, although this wasn't his style. But most of the time, he couldn't control himself in this world. The relationship between the Pope and Aisha isn't simple. Staya looked at the Pope's back and said in a low voice, "Maybe it's because of this that the Church of Light couldn't catch Aisha for so many years." "This isn't a secret," the King of Wisdom said. "You know," Staya suddenly turned around. "You know that the Pope of the Church of Light has a special relationship with witches. There are only two people in the world who have lived so long. Anyone with a little brain can guess that these two are related," the King of Wisdom said. "It's just that very few people dare to think about it. After all, he's the Pope of the Church of Light. Who would think that he has something to do with heretics?" "You knew about this a long time ago?" Staya asked. "Not just me, even your great-grandfather knew about it." "Then what's the relationship between Aisha and the Pope?" "Your great-grandfather didn't pass this down. He only vaguely knew that the Pope was able to become the Pope because of Aisha. Then for so many years, the Church of Light couldn't catch Aisha and let her wreak havoc in the world. Was it also because of the Pope?" "That's not it. The Pope usually doesn't care about the Church's affairs. But for so many years, the Church of Light has been trying to catch Aisha. It's true that they didn't do much. Then won't the believers have any objections?" "No, because even if the Church of Light tried their best, they might not be able to catch Aisha." So the Pope's actions were very rational in the eyes of the believers. They didn't waste the Church's resources to do something that was difficult and unrewarding. Since they might not be able to catch her, they might as well do it half-heartedly and deal with the world. Has the Church of Light fallen to such a state? "I can't say." Staya looked at the King of Wisdom in a daze. After a long time, she sighed and said, "Then tell me about the Human Emperor plan. Why are we staying here? Why did the Golden King fight with Jilin? When the Golden King becomes the Human Emperor, he will gain godlike power. With this power, he will be able to fight against the Red Disaster." This is the Middle Empire's unfounded words. It's not to be believed. I said the same thing before, but it's worth a try. There's nothing to lose anyway. How does he become the Human Emperor? To become the Human Emperor, he needs to collect the fate of the human race in the world. Let the fate of the world gather in one person. Then go to the Cloud Pagoda Mountain for a pilgrimage. Get the recognition of heaven and earth and become the Human Emperor. Cloud Pagoda Mountain? It's said to be a mountain in the middle of the world. It's also the highest mountain in the world. It's in the middle of the Middle Empire. I know that. It's the highest mountain in the world. Is it because this mountain is in the Middle Empire that the Golden King must ascend to the throne? Yes. The Middle Empire occupies the most central position of a human race. Therefore, only the Emperor of the Middle Empire will be recognized by heaven and earth. Then how does he collect the fate of the world? That's why we're here. Now, the human race is divided into 5 empires. Although there are many kingdoms and duchies under them, in general, they're under the jurisdiction of the empires. Therefore, the fate of the world is divided into 5 parts. Each empire has one part, and each empire has a national weapon, which is used to collect fate and strengthen the national fate. Governing a country depends on the wisdom of the emperor, the unity of the people, and the unity of the officials. This is what you said, Father. Why is there such a mysterious thing now? Things like national fate are indeed not very useful in governing a country. But in terms of reducing earthquakes and natural disasters, it can still be used. So, we're going to give our national weapons to the Middle Empire? Yes, the The Golden King will take all the national weapons to the clouds and cover the mountain. In the eyes of heaven and earth, the Middle Empire has already obtained our national weapons and has conquered us. The human race has been completely unified, and the ruler of the human race has been born. This way, the fate of the 5 countries will be concentrated on the Golden King. Heaven and earth will confer him the title of emperor and let him live up to his name. But this is fake. The human race has not been truly unified. Yes, the Sami Empire can never be conquered. Then, this is cheating the heavens. Yes, the plan of emperor is cheating the heavens. Help the Golden King steal the throne of emperor. Temporarily obtain the power of emperor. Steal temporarily? After this is done, the Golden King will lose the power of emperor? That is natural. If the power of emperor can really defeat the Red Calamity, wouldn't the Golden King really unify the human race after this? He can borrow the national weapons, but he has to have a backup plan. Father is really watertight. He has considered all aspects. As an emperor, this is normal. The human race is already in such a state. More than half of the divine dragon empire has already fallen. Yet, he is still not willing to cooperate without holding anything back. Child, you are too naive. Unreserved trust is not something royal clans like us can do. One must always be wary of others. This is also a basic quality of an emperor. Then, what is the Sami Empire's national weapon? The light scripture. So, that is the case. Chapter 293. When Staya heard the words, Sacred Book of Light, she immediately understood. Why was she still staying in the Middle Empire? Why was the wise king so sure that the third prince's power was only temporary? Others might not know about the Sacred Book of Light, but as the owner, she knew it all too well. It cannot be taken away. It would always be under the control of the Sami Empire or the Church of Light. When the wise king wanted to take back the Sacred Book of Light, Staya could do it with a thought. Staya's face instantly darkened. The deceit and intrigue between the human race had never stopped for even a moment. Putting aside the Middle Empire's plan, could the humans really defeat Jilin with such scheming? Staya was not sure, because she knew that it was an enemy that required the full strength of all human beings and the cooperation of all countries to be able to resist. She believed that the various emperors would not fail to understand. They would not think of it, but they just could not do it. Was this what humans were like? They could never let go of the narrowness in their hearts. No matter how clear their hearts were, there would always be a deep darkness hidden within. Staya's thoughts were complicated. She was worried about the future of the humans, so she did not notice it. She kept trying to influence Jilin, but unknowingly, she was also influenced by Jilin. She also started to call him human in her heart. She started to unconsciously remove herself from human and look at humans from the perspective of a bystander. And this was Jilin's habit. The most noble saintess of the humans was finally corrupted by the evil Megalosaurus. It was like the pure light was finally tainted with a hint of haze. This was a very normal thing. One is marked by the company one keeps. When you stare into the abyss stares back at you. The most easily corrupted thing in the world was the cleanest and brightest light. Red Dragon City. The current Red Dragon City was completely different from the first time Aisha came here. With the help of the great dwarven craftsman, a majestic stone city rose from the ground and quietly stood in the westernmost part of the world. It was hidden in the thick, poisonous volcanic gas. Below the city, the dwarves had developed a complex underground city like a maze. If the enemy attacked, the dwarves only needed to activate the mechanism slightly to turn this place into a real maze. And it was a maze with no way out. By then, the dwarves did not even need to fight with the enemy. They only needed to wait for the enemy to starve to death in the maze, and then throw their bodies into the lava. This was Aisha's idea. Aisha said to the dwarves that since they wanted to build a maze, why leave an exit? The dwarves said that if there was no exit, how could it be called a maze? That would be called a dungeon. Aisha said that you can build it to have an exit. Let the enemy think that there was an exit, follow the path they built, and find that it was a dead end. The dwarves were horrified when they heard that. They only felt that this idea was too vicious and then they adopted it. The simple and honest dwarves had never thought of such a sinister idea. For them, it was simply opening the door to a new world. So the dwarves spent a lot of effort building the maze. But Bane thought that it was a waste of effort. Who could go so far into the volcano and then rush into the city on the ground and the defense line formed by countless elemental creatures? If there was, it would be at least a legendary master, right? But how could a legendary master be stopped by a few stone walls? Those that could be stopped could not reach here, and those that could reach here could not be stopped. So it was a waste of effort. But at that time, Bane saw that the dwarves were in high spirits, so he did not say anything to dampen their enthusiasm. He was afraid that the dwarves would beat him up. No one knew how many floors underground. In a stone house with a slightly abrupt architectural style, Bane was sitting on the bed with his eyes closed, breathing in and out constantly. His back was straight, his expression was solemn, and his eyes were focused on his nose. After a long time, Bane slowly opened his eyes and exhaled a cloud of red mist, his eyes flashing with excitement. After a year, he finally entered the 5th level. Bane lowered his head, his right index and middle fingers were raised and put together. A white light appeared on his fingers, slowly condensing into the shape of a sword. According to the Middle Empire, the release of true energy and condensing it into a shape was the sign of the 5th level. The technique he was practicing now was personally taught by Sir Sword Saint, the top technique of the Middle Empire, Ling Jian technique. Bane looked at the light sword and felt as if he'd been cut off from the world for a lifetime. Thinking back to when he was in the village, he never dreamed that he could enter such a high realm. And from the 4th level to the 5th level, it only took a short year. This kind of speed was simply unheard of. But combined with Bane's experience in the past year, it didn't seem surprising. After all, he was a man who had soaked in the Elven Queen's spring of life and received guidance from a legend. And the place where he was now was the place with the highest concentration of fire elements in the world. If he could live here and not die, then this would be a cultivation treasure land that humans dreamed of. Bane kept the light sword and sighed in his heart. He thought that the reason he could have today's strength was all because of Jilin. Thinking of Jilin, Bane's originally excited mood instantly calmed down. Jilin, compared to him, he was too insignificant. Maybe if he stood in front of him and let him look carefully, he might not be able to see that his strength had increased. It was just an ant that had become a little bigger. Bane thought in his heart. Suddenly, there was a sound of thunder from below him. Boom, boom, boom. Bane raised his eyebrows and didn't find it strange at all. He just shook his head and thought that it had started again. It seemed like he was used to it. His current position was already very deep in the Red Dragon City. There was only one place below him. The Red Dragon Palace where Jilin lived. It was also the place where the dwarves forged divine weapons. The sound of thunder was the place where divine weapons were forged. The birth of divine weapons should always be accompanied by wind and thunder. Since this was underground and there was no wind and thunder, he would make some himself. This wasn't a problem for Jilin. In the Red Dragon Palace, Jilin controlled a huge amount of fire elements and attacked a huge sword embryo. That was where the loud explosion came from. The Dwarf King stroked his messy beard. His eyes were shining brightly, as if he had endless energy. But the dense blood vessels in his eyes revealed a message. He was almost out of oil. But the Dwarf King didn't care. He felt that the long-cherished wish of the dwarves would be fulfilled in his hands. Everything was worth it. This was a divine weapon, a weapon that could kill gods. It wasn't surprising for gods to forge divine weapons because they had divine materials that were within reach. But the dwarves could only use the ordinary ores in the world. No matter how precious those ores were in the eyes of the world, they were just beautiful stones compared to divine materials. They were still ordinary objects. But the dwarves wanted to forge these ordinary objects into something comparable to divine materials. They wanted to turn these ordinary objects into existences that could kill gods. This was truly using the power of mortals to stand shoulder to shoulder with gods. This was truly turning stone into gold, turning something rotten into something magical. This was truly a magical skill. The Dwarf King looked at the sword embryo that was gradually taking shape and was extremely proud. But if Jilin knew what he was thinking, he would definitely have a different opinion. What F asterisk king ordinary object? What F asterisk king magical skill? Can't you think better before you speak? In order to forge this sword, you made me pull out 6 teeth while I was still alive. More than 10 dragon scales. The most hateful thing was that you actually made me cut my nails. Have you F asterisk king seen a dragon cutting nails? Jilin occasionally looked at his nails that were cut off by a large section, and he was a little angry. Every time he thought of the scene that day, he was so angry that he wanted to spit fire. That day, when he had just returned to the Red Dragon Palace, the Dwarf King pulled him here. At that moment, before he could ask anything, the Dwarf King said that if he wanted to forge a real divine weapon, the current materials seemed to be a little insufficient. Jilin's heart went cold at that time. He thought to himself, "Isn't that the 1,000-year-old treasure of your dwarves? Weren't you very confident? Now you're telling me that it's not enough." Although Jilin was a little resentful, he didn't say anything. He just asked what materials were still lacking. He could find them as long as they existed in this world. The Dwarf King didn't mention any materials. He just asked Jilin, "Have dragons ever changed their teeth, cut their nails, or shed their scales?" Jilin immediately understood that the Dwarf King had taken a liking to him. Although Jilin was very reluctant at that time, he still compromised. After all, this was a sword made for him. And looking at the Dwarf King's green eyes at that time, it was already good enough that he didn't break his dragon bones and peel off his dragon skin. Jilin now knew what it meant to ask for help and what it meant to compromise. However, his dragon teeth and claws were the best materials that even the Protoss were envious of. It would be a bit shameless if you said that it was a vulgar thing after using it. The roar sounded for a while and finally slowly disappeared. The sword embryo sank into the magma to be nourished. There was still some time before it was really born. Phew, the Dwarf King took a deep breath and fell to the ground. When Jilin was forging the sword just now, he had been paying close attention, and his mind was greatly exhausted. Now that he was relieved, the tiredness that he had been suppressing came up in an instant. At this time, he finally couldn't stand. "Do you want to take a rest?" Jilin rarely cared about others. Yes. The Dwarf King directly lay on the ground, his stomach violently moving up and down, and he panted heavily. He didn't force himself to stay up. "I need to take a rest." "How is it? How is this sword embryo compared to before?" "It must be much stronger," Jilin said. "Haha, that's true," the Dwarf King said. "Dragon scales and dragon teeth, they are really extraordinary." The Dwarf King turned his head and looked at Jilin as if he had seen a rare treasure. "What are you doing?" Jilin was surprised. "Nothing," the Dwarf King pretended to be calm. "I just see that your teeth grow quite fast. They grew out in less than half a day. The scales grow quite fast, too. They grew out in a short, while when I took them off, even faster than the teeth. It's just that the nails grow slower. I suddenly want to kill you," Jilin said gloomily. He felt that the Dwarf King seemed to be greedy for him. Everything that belonged to the Dragon Clan was a priceless treasure to any other clan. The Black Dragon King knew that even if he was as powerful as a dragon, he couldn't resist the endless greed of the world. As the saying goes, one shouldn't be afraid of thieves stealing, but one should be afraid of thieves remembering. That was why the Black Dragon King set up the dragon's tomb. Nothing on the dragon's body could be lost even in death. Over time, it became a big taboo for the dragon race to lose any material on the dragon's body. If it was really lost accidentally, such as accidentally dropping 2 scales in a fight and being picked up by others, and the dragon didn't notice, then there was nothing to be done. But people who used dragon scales without authorization or kept dragon scales privately would incur the anger of the entire dragon race. Therefore, the Water Dragon King used his own dragon bones without authorization, which was treacherous. But Jilin's, it was hard to say, because he used it for himself, so it wasn't considered a loss. But it was also for the Dwarf King. At the very least, the Dwarf King was someone who had used dragon materials. According to the dragon race's customs, this person would undoubtedly die. All evil originated from that bite of the apple. A wolf that had never tasted meat before would never be able to stop once it tasted meat. Then please wait until I forge the divine weapon. Facing Jilin's threat, the Dwarf King was not afraid at all. It was unknown whether he was sure that Jilin would not kill him, or he was really not afraid. Jilin's golden eyes looked at the Dwarf King, and the turbulent dragon's might was like a landslide and a tsunami. Everything in the dragon race can't be used by outsiders. This time is an exception, but there won't be a next time. Don't have any ideas about me. I don't want to kill you. Killing the donkey after it has outlived its usefulness and biting the hand that feeds it. Let the humans do it themselves. Don't force me. I'm just thinking about it. The Dwarf King smiled bitterly. I'm afraid that you won't be able to control yourself if you think about it, Jilin said. The Dwarf King was silent and did not deny it. When will this sword be forged? Jilin changed the topic somewhat stiffly. Is there an enemy in this world who can make you use this sword? The Dwarf King looked at Jilin, who was like a demon god, and felt a little strange. Why are you in such a hurry? Jilin thought to himself, why not? That elf queen, even if I have this sword, I may not be able to win. However, he wasn't in a hurry to seek revenge from the elven queen and get back at her for the sword. I'm going to use this sword to dig out the dragon bones of the Water Dragon King. This matter can't be delayed, and it should be done as soon as possible. As for the Water Dragon King's difficulties, F***CK, his uncle, the shame of the dragon race. His uncle seems to be my relative too. The Dwarf King saw that Jilin ignored him, so he didn't say anything more. Turning around, he stood up and climbed up Jilin's glittering treasure mountain. This treasure mountain was Jilin's lifeblood. Jilin liked to lie on it whenever he had a chance. Among them, there was the legacy left by the hero who wanted to save the princess and Jilin's own collection, but most of it was the reward given by the third prince. It was the reward for helping him get to the top. The Dwarf King picked and picked among them, and the sound of gold colliding could be heard. For the Dwarf King, most of the gold here was useless, but there were also some useful materials. Jilin came back to his senses and looked at the Dwarf King. He gritted his teeth. Chapter 294. What are you doing? Jilin asked fiercely as he looked at the Dwarf King's round body moving with difficulty on the golden mountain. I'm looking for something useful. The Dwarf King did not even raise his head. He was only focused on looking for something in Jilin's treasure mountain. Look at this. It's extremely pure mithril. It's such a big piece, it's wasted on you. The Dwarf King rummaged for a long time and suddenly held up a fist-sized silver-white mineral. Nowadays, the Dwarf King was really working hard. He even did this kind of thing himself. In order to forge this artifact for Jilin, the dwarf race's 1,000-year-old stockpile was shaved off by a lot. Whatever he could find was better. Do you often look for things like this? Jilin looked at the Dwarf King with fire in his eyes. He really suppressed the urge to kill the Dwarf King. No, occasionally. That's impossible, right? I think this golden mountain seems to be a lot smaller. You're wrong. Impossible. The dragon race has a photographic memory. You're really wrong. Even if I'm wrong about you, it's impossible for me to be wrong about this mountain. Is that so? Yes. Jilin finally could not help but reach out and lift the Dwarf King up. His huge fingertips accurately pierced through the Dwarf King's collar. The tight collar made the Dwarf King a little breathless. It's always been me robbing other people's things. No one has ever robbed mine, and you're doing it in front of me. Are you robbing me in broad daylight? Do you really think I don't dare to kill you? Jilin put the Dwarf King in the middle of his eyes. His two golden pupils stared at the Dwarf King together, shining a golden light on the Dwarf King. Jilin's scorching breath sprayed on the Dwarf King's body like boiling water. However, this temperature was naturally unbearable for humans, but for the Dwarf King, who had a strength of level 9 and lived under volcanoes all year round, it was just so. After hearing Crimson Lin's question, the honest Dwarf King nodded his head in agreement. Jilin was about to explode with anger. However, he really didn't dare to kill the Dwarf King now. The Dwarf King looked at Jilin's anger and felt a little embarrassed. So he comforted Jilin and said, "Don't be so angry. How can you say that this is a robbery? Who in this world would dare to steal from you? I think it's a waste to just leave your things here. It's simply a waste. Since I can't bear to do so, I'll make use of it for you." Jilin didn't say anything. He looked at the Dwarf King and was at a loss for the first time in his life. Because today, he finally met someone who dared to be unreasonable with him. It's a waste not to use your family's things. Let me help you use them. The meaning of the Dwarf King should be like this in human language. Was this something a human would say? You see, the Dwarf King saw that Jilin was still the same and was not moved at all, so he planned to explain this to him clearly. We dwarves didn't take your things to hide ourselves like you did, right? Then what are we going to do with your things? Do what? Jilin was stunned. What else can the dwarves do with your materials? Make weapons. The dwarf seemed to be in a hurry. Being carried by Jilin, he was suspended in the air, flailing his arms and legs. His round body looked rather comical. Yeah, Jilin nodded. What the Dwarf King said was right. Then who are we going to make weapons for? We can't use them for ourselves, right? Jilin was speechless, but he nodded silently. This was not wrong. Although the dwarves also had the ability to fight, they never regarded themselves as warriors. They thought that the lives of the dwarves were extremely precious. It was not worth fighting with other races. You see, what are we going to make weapons for? It's for your orc army, your majesty, Beast King. The Dwarf King winked, and his expression was very exaggerated. When did we dwarves rush to make weapons for people? It's always people begging us. You're good. Jilin silently put the Dwarf King back to the ground. It turned out that he was still in the wrong. The Dwarf King looked at Jilin and smiled. Then he turned around and was about to rummage again. But he was thrown out by Jilin at lightning speed. He flew directly out of the gate of the Red Dragon Palace. Stay away from my bed. Jilin's thunderous voice came from the Red Dragon Palace. Jilin finally figured it out. Even if he wanted to make weapons for the orcs, it was far from the point where he had to sell his pots and iron, although he did not have a pot or iron. But this guy tore down his bed. Jilin was angry. No one had ever made him so aggrieved. Jilin sniffed, turned around, and walked to his golden mountain, wanted to take a nap. At this moment, a blue scale floated up from Jilin's gold pile. Jilin was stunned, and his eyes narrowed instantly. At this time, he became extremely dangerous. The shadow of the Water Dragon King appeared behind the scale. Jilin stood up. Senior Water Dragon King, this scale is so far away from you, but you can still appear here? Jilin stared at the Water Dragon King. It's just a small trick. What's more, this is my scale, so it's natural. Senior Water Dragon King, what's the matter? Jilin asked. You didn't repair the wind calming array. The Water Dragon King looked at Jilin, but his voice was calm and steady, neither fast nor slow, as if he was not here to criticize him. Yes, Jilin said, because I haven't made a choice yet. Should I take the dragon bone, or consider the big picture you mentioned? Jilin thought to himself, I've already made my choice. It's just that your dragon bone is buried too deep, and I can't dig it out for the time being. Wait for my sword to be cast. Are you hesitating? Yes. Jilin thought to himself, what's there to hesitate about? The dragon bone will always be the priority. What big picture can compare to it? Although Xiao Qin's parents did not take away the dragon bone back then, which was indeed suspicious, that was not important. Since they left Xiao Qin here alone, didn't that mean that Xiao Qin could do whatever he wanted? Xiao Qin wanted the dragon bone. However, while you were hesitating, countless citizens of the Divine Dragon Empire lost their lives. What does that have to do with me? Jilin thought to himself. However, when the words reached his mouth, he changed his expression. Senior, how do you know about this? Jilin asked. Could it be that Senior can see the world, even after death? That's not it. It's because Divine Dragon City is about to fall. The Water Dragon King said. I personally laid down Divine Dragon City's protective ritual array, so I can sense it. Right now, Divine Dragon City is in danger. Since it is Senior Water Dragon King's ritual array, it must be extremely powerful. It should be able to destroy the world. With such a ritual array, Divine Dragon City must be impregnable. How could it be in danger? This I don't know why, but the ritual array has not been activated. Jilin blinked and sneaked a glance at the knight's key embedded in the ceiling of the Red Dragon Palace, still giving off a lustrous white light, illuminating the entire Red Dragon Palace. Xiaoqin thought, I know why, because they can't activate it. In that case, what does Senior Dragon King mean? You want me to guard Divine Dragon City? That would be for the best. That's not good, right? Jilin asked. The Water Dragon King fell silent. Jilin was right. That was not good. The dragon race had an unwritten rule. The dragon race would not interfere with the matters of the weak races, such as humans and the sea race. Firstly, the dragon race's interference would have a huge impact on these races. It would be easy for karma to entangle them. Secondly, the dragon race could not be bothered to interfere. They felt that it was beneath their status and did not want to interfere. Hence, most dragon race members obeyed this rule. When other races sought help from the dragon race would use this as an excuse. However, it was clear that the Water Dragon King was not a dragon that obeyed this rule. If you help, I will definitely reward you greatly. Senior, you're already dead. Rest in peace. The matters of the world have nothing to do with you anymore. There are still some things that did not go with me. I cannot help the humans guard the city. Jilin's attitude turned somewhat serious. Then, the Water Dragon King relented. Clearly, even if the Water Dragon King did not agree with Jilin's words, he could understand them. At the very least, help me protect one person, the Water Dragon King said. This matter is as easy as lifting a finger for you. That is natural. However, I wonder who this person is. Why does Senior still remember her even after she died? A bright light flashed in Jilin's eyes. However, his lowered eyelids blocked it. His voice did not fluctuate at all, showing nothing strange. After living in a human world for a long time, Jilin had already learned what it meant to remain calm and collected. The image behind the blue scales changed like a mirage, instantly turning into the appearance of a young woman. This woman wore a long blue dress in the style of the Divine Dragon Empire. She looked graceful and luxurious, but she did not lose her spiritual aura. She was clearly not an ordinary person. Jilin was stunned. Then, he firmly memorized this woman's appearance in his mind. This woman looked somewhat similar to the woman in the mural above the Water Dragon King's head. This is too interesting. The Water Dragon King has been dead for countless years, yet he still knows the appearance of a woman in the current world. Who is this woman? The Divine Dragon Empire's princess. That's great, Jilin thought. Staya just left, and a princess of the Divine Dragon Empire came for me. Indeed, the dragon race should have a human princess accompanying them. How about it? Do you agree? Since Senior has spoken, I will naturally give you face. However, how should I deal with this princess after bringing her back? It would be best if you personally took care of her. Is it worth it? It is. Again, indeed. What about the reward that Senior promised? If you protect her, I'll tell you a secret. What secret is worth the dragon race protecting a human? The truth of this world. Okay. Jilin watched as the Water Dragon King's scales dimmed again and fell into the pile of gold, making crisp clinking sounds. Jilin had never believed the Water Dragon King. He felt that the shame of the dragon race might really have created something like a son of the human dragon, something that could make the dragon race's dignity and glory disappear in an instant. Jilin wanted to find this son of the human dragon. Kill him. However, he had no clue, but now he did. The Divine Dragon City that the Water Dragon King had spent so much effort on was about to be destroyed. He couldn't care less. At this moment, the Water Dragon King didn't want anything but a human. It seemed that this human was more important than this city. What kind of person could be so important in the eyes of a dragon? The answer was obvious. Jilin felt that if there really were a son of the human dragon, this woman would definitely be one of them. Even if the Water Dragon King didn't say anything, he would definitely look for her. However, he couldn't rule out the possibility that this was a bait thrown by the Water Dragon King to attract his attention. If Aisha knew what Jilin was thinking at this moment, she would definitely be deeply gratified. After a few years, Jilin finally became a little deeper and darker. 3 days later, Bane strolled around Red Dragon City with nothing to do. What he saw and heard were wonders that didn't exist in the human world. Bane looked at the elemental creatures coming and going. Each of them looked strange. Then he looked at the traps that the dwarves asked him to pay attention to. Each of them was extremely dangerous. Bane thought that if this was a mission issued by the Adventurers Union, then exploring Red Dragon City would definitely be the highest level. The bounty would also be set up to be jaw-dropping. There were monsters and traps everywhere. It was a design that didn't give people a chance to survive. Many adventurers came and couldn't get the bounty. Suddenly, there was a faint sobbing sound. Bane immediately noticed it. It wasn't because his ears were sharp, but because the sound was too abrupt here. It was out of place with everything around. The sobbing of a human woman. How could there be a human woman crying here? Bane frowned and strode in the direction of the sound. This was the lowest level of Red Dragon City. Here, he didn't have to worry about any unexpected dangers. Bane walked along the straight, solid passage. The passage was very smooth and square-built by the dwarves. Bane looked at the light sources embedded in the walls on both sides of the road and couldn't help but feel a little emotional. Before the dwarves came, where would there be lights on the road? It was pitch black everywhere. Only the places very close to the magma had some light. Elemental creatures didn't need light, and neither did Jilin. Bane walked all the way to the end of the road. He looked at the scene in front of him and suddenly froze, because what appeared in front of him was a prison cell. Yes, a prison cell. More than a dozen metal pillars as thick as an arm formed a fence, separating the passage and the prison cell. Bane walked closer and looked at the metal pillars. He knocked on them with his hand. It was obvious that the dwarves had casually made them, but they were still solid and reliable. Bane looked at the other side of the fence. It was a very crude and perfunctory room. There were only necessary living tools, a stone bed, a chair. There was a thick beast fur on the bed. It looked like it was contributed by Singh. There were traces of cutting everywhere in the room, showing that it was a newly dug space. The dwarves did this work very hastily. Bane finally looked at the human girl lying on the bed, burying her face in the fur and crying nonstop. He wondered if he woke up in the wrong way today. Bane suddenly noticed that the girl was wearing a chain on her foot. The other end of the chain was directly embedded in the stone bed. She was locked here. The girl seemed to notice that someone had come. She raised her head and turned to look at Bane. Bane then noticed that there was a crown in front of the girl. The girl was lying on the bed just now and was blocked. Was this a princess? Bane slowly withdrew his gaze and finally saw the girl's face. Bane couldn't help but hold his breath. A weeping beauty, delicate and pitiful. Bane looked at this face. He was neither lustful nor sympathetic. His first thought was, Jilin, you've improved. That shamelessly asking for a wave of recommendation votes, monthly votes, thank you, thank you. Chapter 295. Yes, this was the first thought that came to Bane's mind when he saw the girl. Jilin, you've really improved, you've really grown. As a dragon, you finally know how to catch a princess. Look at the one you caught this time. TSK, TSK. I can't help but feel pity for her. She looks petite and weak, the perfect example of a weak girl. This is the image of a captured princess. Think about the last one you caught. What kind of princess was that? She has the strength to pick up a mountain, and her aura is unparalleled. You are a human? The princess looked at Bane with teary eyes, her tears still flowing down. Her voice was trembling, as if it contained endless fear. Yes, Bane pretended to be calm and nodded. I'm a human. You didn't expect that, right? You can see a human in this godforsaken place. I didn't expect that either. There are probably only 2 humans within 1,000 miles of this place. Are you here to save me? The princess suddenly stood up and rushed towards Bane. Even in this hellish place, the princess still behaved appropriately. Her every movement perfectly conformed to human etiquette. The princess lifted her skirt lightly. Her steps were so graceful and agile. She was a living standard lady. The education of the royal family's etiquette was deeply engraved in her bones. She wasn't like Staya. Stee also knew the etiquette and manners that seemed to be very grand. Bane had seen it when he met the Iron Blood King with Staya, and he couldn't find any fault with it. He was really shocked at that time. but she usually didn't do that. Her etiquette seemed to be used only for important occasions. Just like her skills, she would use them when she needed them, but when she didn't use them, she didn't even remember that she knew them. Look at this. This is a real princess. Elegant, noble splat. Just as Bane was sighing in his heart, the princess's leg was suddenly pulled by the iron chain, and she fell down, her face landing on the ground. Are you okay? Bane was shocked. I am fine. The princess slowly got up, but she was still sitting on the ground, her hands tightly covering her face, not knowing if it was because of the pain from the fall or because she felt embarrassed. Are you here to save me? The princess's voice was muffled through the gaps of her fingers. This, Bane didn't dare to answer. He wanted to say that he couldn't save her. Not to mention him, even if all the legendary experts in this world formed an adventurers team, it seemed to come here, they couldn't save her. But in the face of such a gentle girl, looking at those big, watery eyes that revealed her innocence, no one would be able to say such words, right? Yes, I'm here to save you. Bane made up his mind. He really wanted to slap himself. That's great, powerful hero. As long as you save me, my father will definitely give you the most generous reward. The princess immediately took her hand down, her face brimming with the most radiant smile. To people to see her to look. Bane blinked, thinking that he wasn't after this. And the heroes who saved the princess probably weren't after this either. They were after light and justice. And the princess, may I ask, Your Highness, which country's princess are you? Bane was someone who had visited all the big empires and could be said to be experienced and knowledgeable. But looking at the princess's black hair and blue eyes, he couldn't be sure. Looking at her black hair, it should be the symbol of the Middle Empire. In that case, this princess should be the third prince's niece or sister. But after all, Jilin and the third prince had some friendship. He shouldn't have touched the third prince's family, right? That's not right. The 7 princes died back then, but this didn't make sense. The royal family of the Middle Empire couldn't possibly have blue eyes. That group of people valued their own bloodline very much. Those who weren't of the same race were sure to have different intentions. This sentence was the best description of the Middle Empire. But the royal family of the other empires didn't have such a face and hair. "You're not here to save me?" the princess suddenly asked. Bane was stunned, and then he really wanted to slap himself. He didn't expect to let it slip with just a few words. He was too damn comfortable in this place. He didn't even think before speaking. If he asked which country's princess she was, then he definitely didn't know her. If he was here to save her, how could he not even know what she looked like? This? Bane didn't know what to say. I'm the princess of the Divine Dragon Empire, called Lysena. Divine Dragon Empire. Bane's brows immediately furrowed. Overthrowing the Divine Dragon Empire's royal family was his dream in the Red Dragon sect. Enemies were really bound to meet on a narrow road. Hero, you must be very powerful to be able to kill your way here from the surface and break through the obstruction of so many demons without suffering any injuries, right? Can you save me? Lysena stared at Bane with her big bright eyes. Bane felt bitter, thinking, why is this princess so ignorant? After the dwarves modified Red Dragon City, there were a total of 23 floors. Demons of different strengths patrolled randomly on each floor. They were actually just wandering around aimlessly. Moreover, those demons were all very powerful. Since Jilin came here, those guys have been greatly strengthened. Now, even the weakest one was at tier 6. They were even 1 tier higher than Bane. Moreover, this place was filled with the intricately designed traps of the dwarves. There was also Sing and that human-shaped elemental creature, Bat-Tel. Both of them were legendary. If anyone could really kill their way here without suffering any injuries like Lysena said, then how could very powerful be enough to describe them? No one in the world could do it. Please bring me out, Lysena said again. Bane just wanted to laugh. You still want to run out? Princess, do you know where this place is? Even if I have Jilin's protection, even if those dwarves and elemental creatures ignore us, because we are acquaintances, I don't have the confidence to walk back to the human territory from here. Why don't you say anything? The princess looked at Bane and asked. Ahem. Bane cleared his throat. Your Highness, is there an evil megalosaurus that captured you cruelly and imprisoned you here? Yes, yes. The princess opened her eyes wide and nodded. I actually came for that evil dragon. That evil dragon has done all kinds of bad things in the human territory, and the heavens cannot tolerate it, Bane said righteously. You are the hero who came to slay the dragon. The princess's face was full of amazement, and her expression of admiration was overflowing. Yes, Bane nodded deeply. I came to slay the dragon. As far as I know, that evil dragon is right below us. I met the princess here and should immediately rescue her. But looking at this metal cage, it is obviously not ordinary. I am afraid that the dragon will know as soon as it is destroyed. When the dragon comes, although I'm not afraid, I am afraid that it will be difficult for me to protect the princess. Yes, yes, you are right. Then what do you think we should do? The princess looked worried. Easy, Bane said heroically. He pulled out the long sword that he had been wearing and said passionately, wait for me to kill that evil dragon first, and then come back to rescue the princess. At that time, it will be safer to go. The princess is of noble birth, and her body is priceless. She must not be wronged. Hero, you are right, the princess said, but I don't know if you can defeat that evil dragon. Ha ha, it is just an evil dragon. It is not worth mentioning. Princess, just wait for the good news. Bane waved his hand and turned to leave, looking decisive and confident to the extreme. What was insufferably arrogant confidence? This was it. The princess looked at Bane's incomparably tall figure with admiration. However, she did not know that her face, which she could not see, was filled with apprehension and uneasiness. Bane was really afraid that Jilin would hear. Bane wanted to help this princess. After all, they were both humans, and he was fine. Furthermore, the princess was innocent, pitiful, and beautiful. However, he instinctively realized that this matter was not that simple. This princess was not simple to Jilin. She was just a princess. There must be something else going on. Bane knew that although it was not obvious, Jilin was really lazy. Normally, he would not use 20% of his strength for something that could be done with 10% of his strength. Therefore, even if Jilin really had a princess complex and thought that there should be a princess by the dragon's side, and he wanted to capture another one to replace Staya, it should not be someone from the Divine Dragon Empire. This was because the Divine Dragon Empire was the furthest from here. Jilin could totally capture another one from the Saimai Empire, Staya's elder sister or something like that. They even looked similar. Even if it was to give face to Staya, the Saimai Empire could not do it. However, there was wind and snow above and Nanshin below. There was no need to go to the Divine Dragon Empire at all. Moreover, even if all this was not mentioned, he had built a prison cell for a human and even locked her up with iron chains. According to Jilin's style of doing things, there was no need for this at all. How could a human run away from here? It was not worth it to go through so much trouble for a human. Moreover, this was not the treatment that Jilin's princess should receive. Bane's mind was filled with questions. He went down the stairs and walked into the Red Dragon Palace. From afar, he saw Jilin lying on the Golden Mountain, illuminated by the light of the night's key and the lava. Bane's heart sank. It's over. He must have fallen asleep. I can't wake him up either. Bane figured it out and planned to go back. Just as he turned around, a loud but not deafening voice sounded behind him. What are you doing here? Bane turned around and narrowed his eyes slightly. Jilin opened one of his eyes and looked at him. The golden light in Jilin's eyes dazzled Bane's eyes. Bane used his hand to block the light and heaved a sigh of relief. Since Jilin asked this, it meant that he did not know what he said to the princess. You're not sleeping? You're lying on the Golden Mountain with your eyes closed. It's rare to see you not sleeping, Bane said. I'm thinking about something, Jilin said. Bane was really panicking this time. How big of a deal is this? How could it make Jilin not sleep and think with his eyes closed? Bane didn't want to help Jilin think about such a big deal. He didn't want to know either, so he didn't ask. Bane calmed down and said directly, I saw a woman on the upper floor. You can't touch this woman. You mother asterisk her. Jilin's eyes shone brightly. What kind of person do you think I am? Bane cursed halfway and finally swallowed it back. A normal human male, Jilin said. I won't take advantage of others. I have a bottom line. Bane yelled at the top of his lungs. Bottom line. Jilin tilted his head and knocked over a lot of gold. What's the use of that thing? Bane was stunned. You don't have to care about that. Who is the woman you caught? Bane asked. Since you've already seen her, you should know, Jilin said. I want to hear you tell me that I don't believe her, Bane said. Oh, Jilin finally opened his other eye. Why? Because this woman is not simple. Bane said seriously, your city, in the eyes of humans now, should be the Demon King's city in all kinds of stories. Dragon's Pool and Tiger's Den is just a humble way of saying it. Normal humans would be scared out of their wits if they came here. You mean she's not scared? Jilin said. She's scared, but she can still stay calm and do what's best for her. Normal people can't laugh at you, but she can, and she smiles very beautifully. You can't touch this woman. That's enough. Ben couldn't stand it anymore. In your eyes, humans are always thinking about such trivial things, right? Otherwise, how did you reproduce to such a large population? Bane was speechless again. What exactly is this woman's background? The Divine Dragon Empire's princess, Jilin said. That shouldn't be the case. Bane shook his head. When I was in the Red Dragon Church, I saw the portraits of the Divine Dragon Empire's main royal family members. I never saw anyone with black hair. Why are you looking at her portrait? If I run into her in the future, I'll kill her. Her methods are really not presentable. That's true. However, if this person is really the Divine Dragon Empire's princess, that would be interesting. Then, you mean, this means that the Divine Dragon Empire has hidden this princess, and hidden her very deeply. The Red Dragon Church has long infiltrated the Divine Dragon Empire like a sieve. Hence, there are basically no secrets in the Divine Dragon Empire that we don't know, except for a few things in this princess. So, why do they put in so much effort to hide this princess? Because she is related to the Water Dragon King. The Water Dragon King? How many years has he been dead? How is that possible? Could it be a human dragon's son? Jilin didn't say anything, only shaking his head. When he captured this woman, he had carefully examined her. She didn't have any dragon bloodline in her. At such a close distance, Jilin was confident that he didn't see wrong. Bane heaved a sigh of relief. If Jilin really found the human dragon's son, who knew what he would do, he might really destroy the world. Chapter 296. Bane heaved a sigh of relief, knowing that at least Jilin had no intention of destroying the world. Since she's not the son of the dragon, why did you lock her up so tightly? You even made a cage and locked her up with such a thick shackle. Do you know how heavy that thing is? Do you know how painful it is to wear that thing? Bane began to complain about the injustice for the delicate princess. Even if she was not simple, she was still a girl of heart. He could guard against her, but there was no need to be so rough. Jilin looked at Bane strangely, and after a while, he shook his head. I don't know. Do you? Bane was stunned, and then said hesitantly, I don't know either. Bane had never worn that thing. It's just a girl. Do you have to be like this? Here, are you still afraid that she will run away? Indeed, a little, Jilin said directly. What's wrong with you? Bane was stunned, and looked at Jilin and asked. This was not Jilin's style. Bane thought that with a little provocation, Jilin would disdainfully express that humans were not worth mentioning in his eyes, and then remove the shackles on the princess's feet. Even if he did not let her go, he could at least give her some freedom, just like Staya in the past. This should be nothing to Jilin. Whether the shackle was locked or not, there was no difference in Jilin's eyes. However, Jilin still locked it. Even if he was provoked by Bane's words, he did not care at all. He did not intend to remove the unnecessary shackle. This was too abnormal. What is the origin of that princess? Bane asked. Why do you value her so much? So, worried about personal gains and losses? That cage is right above your head, and there's an entire dwarf race and all the elemental creatures wandering around. Presumably, even if Sir Sword Saint was here, he would not be able to escape under your nose. You wouldn't have gone through so much trouble. What's so special about this girl? Not me, but the Water Dragon King. Jilin closed his eyes. That day, the Water Dragon King personally came to me and asked me to save this woman. Save her. Bane was stunned. What danger could a princess be in? Even the Divine Dragon Empire couldn't stop them. You even have to trouble that ancestor to look for you. The Red Dragon sect has started to attack the Divine Dragon City with the help of the Sea Tribe. Jilin said, when I arrived there 3 days ago, numerous Red Dragon sect members had already surrounded the Divine Dragon City. Their numbers were like duckweed on the surface of a lake, densely packed and covering the ground. Moreover, at that time, they had already ascended the outer wall. Bane blinked, thinking that it was indeed a precarious situation. Sect leader Flay was truly amazing. Her grasp of timing was truly accurate. Once the Divine Dragon Empire no longer has Dragon Knights, our great cause will immediately advance by leaps and bounds. Bane lamented for a while. Then, he suddenly thought of something wrong. That's not right. You can't even remember their faces. How did you know they were Red Dragon sect members? They all wore red cloaks with my portrait on their backs, Jilin said. Bane was speechless. Since that was the case, they were definitely Red Dragon sect members. Then, what do you want to do with that girl? Bane asked. I haven't thought about it yet, Jilin said. What did the Water Dragon King mean? He didn't mean anything. He just told me to bring her down. He didn't say how. He said to do as I wish. What do you think? I can't see through her. Let's lock her up first. Do you really think that she's related to that so-called dragon son? Of course. However, didn't you already see her? She is not. Even if she is not, there might be a connection. Perhaps we can find the true dragon's son through this woman. What if there is no dragon's son? That would be best. Then wouldn't you be wasting your efforts? I don't care. Bane was speechless. Since Jilin didn't even care about this, then he probably didn't care about anything. His determination was as strong as iron. Then at least, can you not lock her up like that? Release her shackles? She can't run away anyway. No way. Jilin rejected without hesitation. Bane was taken aback by this. It seemed that Jilin had considered Bane's suggestion. However, after careful consideration, he still chose to lock her up. Why? She doesn't seem to have any abilities, right? Bane was puzzled. Whether or not you can run away has nothing to do with strength, Jilin said seriously. Bane tilted his head. His face was full of confusion. What do you mean? What do you mean? Who do you think is stronger, Aisha or the one with the sword? Jilin said. You said before that even the one with the sword can't run away from here. I think so too, but Aisha can. She could appear beside me silently and send all the humans away in front of me. Aisha can do what the one with the sword can't. This woman is very important. I have to be careful. Bane sighed. Even Jilin had to be careful. What else could he say? Actually, he already knew what Jilin was going to say the moment he opened his mouth. Aisha, how could she be compared to a normal person? The witch's methods were mysterious and unpredictable. Normal people couldn't guess. Moreover, she was the only legendary witch left in the continent. She inherited all the witches' legacies, although her legend was not the same as the Sword Saint's legend. But in a sense, Aisha was the real legend. After death, she would be recorded in human history. Bane wanted to tell Jilin that Aisha was special. What she could do, no one else in the world could do. But he also knew that such words would not make sense to Jilin, because in Jilin's eyes, Aisha was not special. If she can really do what Aisha did, your things would be the same as nothing. It's better than nothing. Bane was really speechless this time. Jilin began to ask for peace of mind. Then even the gods couldn't do anything. He gave up. Forget it. At worst, he wouldn't see the princess. He would let her think of it as a hero who fought a fierce battle with an evil dragon and then died bravely. Hey, do you see any changes in me? Bane asked such a question out of the blue. After all, he still wanted to share the joy of leveling up with other people. Jilin reluctantly opened his eyes and looked at him, but closed them again after 3 seconds. He ignored him. He just couldn't see it. With Jilin's eyesight, it might only take a moment to see through a human like Bane, but he looked at Bane for 3 seconds. This could be said to be very serious and careful, but he still couldn't see it. Bane had expected it. But the reality still made him uncomfortable for a while. It was one thing to expect it, but it was another thing to actually experience it. The difference was like heaven and earth. They couldn't be compared. Suddenly, Jilin's eyes opened, and a strong golden light instantly shone. It directly suppressed the white light of the night's key and the red light of the magma. The strong golden light shone on the surrounding glass walls, turning the entire red dragon palace into a golden color. Bane closed his eyes, and at the same time used his hand to block the strong light. He was a little puzzled. After spending so much time with Jilin, he kind of figured it out. The light in Jilin's eyes represented two things. First, his mood. When Jilin's mood fluctuated more, the golden light in his eyes would become brighter. Secondly, it was when he started to seriously spar with others. Now it was obviously not the second, so it must be the first. It was just leveling up by one level. Was it necessary? And his reaction was a little slow. What's wrong? Bane asked. A powerhouse was born. Jilin left such a sentence and flew away in the next moment. Bane ran forward 2 steps and looked up in the direction Jilin had just left. Above Jilin's head was a volcanic crater, and outside the crater was a red sky. A powerhouse was born. Even Jilin thought it was a powerhouse. Who could it be? Half a day earlier, a group of people gathered at the foot of Cloudpall Mountain in the Middle Empire. Cloudpall Mountain was publicly acknowledged as the highest mountain in the world. It was extremely steep, and towering into the clouds was just an objective description. Cloudpall Mountain meant that even the rosy clouds in the sky could only serve as a cloak. Usually, this place was deserted. Apart from elegant people who loved mountains and rivers, no one would be bored enough to take such a difficult path. No one knew if the path up Cloudpall Mountain was as difficult as ascending to the blue sky, but in any case, it was ascending to the heavens. There were no more than 200 people gathered at the foot of the mountain. But what was unexpected was that the 5 great emperors of the human race were all gathered here. In fact, the army of the Middle Empire had long since cordoned off the area within 10 li of Cloudpall Mountain, and all unrelated people had been expelled. Such a major event could not be tolerated by the slightest accident. Is this Cloudpall Mountain? It's truly exquisite. It's truly a magnificent sight. The War King couldn't help but feel refreshed as he gazed at this wondrous mountain. A heroic spirit arose spontaneously, as if this mountain was about to soar into the sky. The War King could not help sighing emotionally. It is indeed high, but it will be difficult when we climb the mountain. The Golden King showed a bitter expression. He had long heard about how difficult it was to climb Cloudpall Mountain. The royal family of the Middle Empire came here every year to offer sacrifices. Although the War King had run away from home when he was young and had never been here before, but those good friends of his would always run over to him to complain. Let's go quickly, Golden King. Don't forget your promise, the Hero King said. Hero King, rest assured. The Golden King said seriously, with the human sovereign's power in hand, your divine dragon empire's problems will vanish instantly. All right, the Hero King nodded. Let's go then, the Iron Blood Monarch said. Then, he turned and walked towards the only small path. Let's go then. The Golden King sighed and followed. Although Shao Chun had the golden flying ship, he still had to walk this path himself. The royal family of the Middle Empire came here every year to offer sacrifices. The Middle Empire, which paid particular attention to ostentation, would definitely build a path here. Hence, this path was actually not that difficult or dangerous. With the sword saint pulling him, the Golden King finally reached the summit under the disdainful gazes of the other monarchs. There was no helping it. Shao Chen's stamina was the weakest here. The War King went without saying. The other emperors had also been trained and educated by the royal family since they were young. They could not lack either political or military skills. Their bodies were excellent, making sufficient preparations for the arduous work of emperors in the future. The Golden King was different. He had not received much training when he was young. When he was young, he wasted his time in brothels. The summit of Cloudpall Mountain was a small platform, just big enough for 100 or so people to stand on. The ground was made of stone all around, looking natural. It was as if someone had used the wind to cut off the peak of the mountain, leaving behind this empty space. At the very center of the summit was an altar made completely of earth. This seemed to be the only sign of human activity here. It was impossible to see the bottom from here because the endless sea of clouds blocked the view. All one could see was the sky, the clouds, and the sun. As far as one could see, everything was clean and pure. The sun was dazzling, the clouds were soft and beautiful, and the sky was vast and boundless. It was indescribably beautiful. This scenery made one want to breathe a sigh of relief. It was as if the resentment that had accumulated in one's heart for many years could instantly dissipate. This was the place closest to the heavens in the human world, the summit of Cloud Palm Mountain, the place where the human race offered sacrifices to the heavens. An altar was built on this mountain to offer sacrifices to the heavens. Before the crowd could enjoy the beautiful scenery before them, the Minister of Rites, Lord Ouyang, who was dressed in a heavy court robe, began to issue orders and mobilize the troops. The old man's decadent appearance was swept away. His usual half-dead appearance, as if he was about to die of old age, was gone. He suddenly became energetic and awe-inspiring. It was as if a lion had finally woken up. The old man was in high spirits here, maneuvering and maneuvering freely. And he was a man of his word. Even His Majesty, the Golden King, had to listen to the old man's orders. After a short while, everyone stood in their respective positions under the command of the old man. The 108 scholars that came with him had already knelt down around the altar, forming a circle. They were also holding various ritual objects in their arms. They were held high above their heads. Some of them were books. Some of them were bags of food. Some of them were bronze objects. They were all different. As for the legendary masters who came with the emperors, the Sword Saint, and the Pope, the old man directly put them out of this circle. In other words, they were just watching this sacrificial ceremony from the side. It had nothing to do with them. They couldn't get involved. As for Staya, who came with them, she stood further away than these two. Only the old man was unhappy. According to the social customs of the Middle Empire, where men were superior to women, Staya shouldn't have climbed this mountain. But there was no other way. If they wanted to use the holy grimoire of light, Staya had to be next to it. The Golden King carried the 9-cauldron sword and walked up to the altar. Under the old man's fierce gaze, he knelt down on the altar. The current empress, Miss Shiweching, knelt under the altar behind the Golden King to the right. The other 4 emperors knelt directly behind the Golden King. Originally, they weren't willing. To them, it was fine to kneel to the heavens, but kneeling behind the Golden King was unacceptable. But there was no other way. The red disaster was too strong. Ouyang Ju stood on the left in front of the Golden King. He was also the only person in this circle who didn't have to kneel, because his current identity wasn't a human, but the host of this sacrificial ceremony. He was the facilitator and leader of the communication between man and the heavens. The mandate of heaven is the king, making all living things reasonable, announcing peace to the heavens, reporting the merits of the gods. When I received the mandate, I changed the system according to the heavens, and the world was at peace. I became a pilgrimage to announce peace. In the Lord Ouyang's grand, resounding singing voice, the sacrificial ceremony began. Chapter 297. Yunpa Mountain was huge, but the platform at the top of the mountain was not very big. However, there was only a small piece of land above the clouds, which was very eye-catching. The sea of clouds was endless. It was a small island in the sky. When people looked around, it was easy to feel isolated. The universe was infinitely big, but there were only so many people. At times like this, the concept of self would become clear. People would suddenly notice their own existence. This feeling was too sudden, too clear, and too unfamiliar. No one would have such a strong sense of self in a crowd. Lord Ouyang's voice was solemn and grand, like the bells in the royal temples of the Middle Empire. It seemed that the sea of clouds was trembling. It did not sound like the voice of a 90-year-old man. Staya looked at the solemn old man and thought to herself. Then Staya looked at the Pope, thinking that he was even older. Of course, Ouyang-ju was not the only one in such a grand ceremony. After all, the 108 people were not just here to look at the scenery. Every time Lord Ouyang said a sentence, they would repeat it neatly. It looked like a teacher in a school teaching students how to read and write. The teacher said one sentence, and the students said another sentence. However, in this scene, coupled with Mr. Ouyang's rhythmic and complicated ceremonial speech, the parrot-like behavior suddenly became noble and sacred. This little guy is not simple. His Majesty the Pope looked at Ouyang-ju. After a while, he said seriously, he can remember such a long and difficult speech. This is much harder to memorize than the Holy Bible of Light. Impressive. Who are you talking about? Sword Saint frowned and asked softly. The one standing there. The Pope tilted his head slightly and moved closer to Sword Saint's ear. The Sword Saint's frown deepened as he turned to look at the Pope. Ouyang-ju was now the leader of the literary world in the Middle Empire, an elder of 4 emperors, highly respected. To put it simply, he was already very old. So old that even if he died of old age in the next moment, no one would be surprised. His family would happily hold a grand funeral for him. In the Middle Empire, people of Ouyang-ju's age would have a happy funeral. However, such an old man was called a little guy by the Pope. Even Sword Saint felt a little unhappy, because when he was young, when he was still hanging out with Li Zhengcheng, Ouyang-ju was already a person of virtue and prestige. However, the Sword Saint couldn't say anything because the Pope was indeed qualified to say so. 200 years old. In the human world, if 2 people with 100 years age gap, the younger one's age gap, the older one might not even be willing to accept it. The old man felt that his grandson. Sword Saint did not want to talk to the Pope anymore. Old Lord Ouyang was already a little guy in the Pope's mouth. Who knew what the Pope would call him when he talked to him? Sword Saint did not say anything, but it did not matter. If the Pope wanted to talk, why would he need others to talk? After listening carefully for a while, the Pope turned his head and asked, "What are you talking about? Why can't I understand a single word? Do you understand?" Sword Saint did not say anything again, but this time it was not because of anything else. It was purely because the Sword Saint didn't understand. What Lord Ouyang was reading now was the ancient language of the Middle Empire that had been passed down since ancient times. It was the most difficult to understand. It was not something that could be understood just by knowing the language of the Middle Empire. Although Sword Saint was cultured, he had his own specialization, so he did not dabble in this subject. Aya, you're a Middle Empire citizen. How can you not understand this? Did you not go to school when you were young because your family was poor? Staya could not help but look at the Pope. She thought that Sword Saint could not draw his sword and slash him now, right? Sword Saint could not help but look at the Pope as well. He thought that if the Pope fell from here, he would probably fall to his death. Why are you looking at me with such a murderous look? The Pope was shocked. It seemed that he was indeed a legendary master. After living for so many years, he was very sensitive to murderous looks. This is a sacrificial ceremony. It is extremely solemn and serious. I hope that Master Pope can restrain himself. Sword Saint thought that this was a serious matter and did not want to disturb the Pope, so he did not draw his sword and slash the Pope. However, the Pope did not seem to care at all. He did not take the Pope's words to heart. What is this ceremony? The Church of Light has tens of thousands of churches. We do one every week. Don't you think so, Saintess? Staya looked straight at the altar. She did not look sideways. It was obvious that he was not talking to her, and she did not know him. How can the Church of Light ceremony be compared to this sacrificial ceremony? Sword Saint was not polite anymore. There was no need to be polite when talking to people like this. If you gave him a stick, he would climb up the stick. What? Are you looking down on the Church of Light ceremony? The Pope said, Your Highness. Sword Saint's tone became heavier. This is the ceremony for the ascension of the human emperor. The Pope finally stopped talking. Indeed, the annual sacrificial ceremony in the Middle Empire was not worth mentioning. It was similar to the Church of Light ceremony. It was all about human self-entertainment. But this time was different. The ascension of the human emperor. No other ceremony could be compared to this one. It was not on the same level at all. It was like comparing the Cloud Palm Mountain to other mountains. He would be at the top of the mountain, and the other mountains would not be able to see him. If that's the case, how's your teaching of the Golden King's swordsmanship going? The Pope asked. After all, he is the one who has to fight against the Red Disaster. Tisk, Sword Saint actually clicked his tongue. It was this clicked tongue that made the Pope and Staya turn their heads to look at him in shock. The two of them looked at each other and felt that the sound of Sword Sage smacking his tongue just now seemed to have drowned out the voices of the 108 people singing in unison. Hey, don't scare me. Say something. What do you mean, click your tongue? The Pope said. You are the Sword Saint, the strongest human swordsman. Don't tell me that you can't teach a person how to do it. This time, Staya did not mind the Pope's nagging, because these are the questions she wanted to know the answers to. The Sword Saint nodded his head painfully. The Pope's eyes widened. He pointed at Sword Saint with a trembling finger. He said for a long time, but no words came out. Master Sword Saint, how is that possible? Staya continued the Pope's words. No one in the world is unconvinced by your swordsmanship. I've seen with my own eyes the no-return swordsmanship that you created for Bane. It's truly exquisite and amazing. A Sword Saint like you, if you can teach Bane, why can't you teach the Third Prince? Or rather, what is the level of the Third Prince's swordsmanship now? Is it because he has already reached a higher level, but in your eyes, he is still not worth mentioning? Staya sure knows how to comfort herself. Sword Saint shook his head with a bitter smile and closed his eyes in pain. Staya and the Pope saw Sword Saint's reaction. They could not help but look at each other. They finally understood that the third young master's swordsmanship was truly too horrible to look at. Even the Lord Sword Saint had reached the point where he was too ashamed to speak. How can this be? The Pope muttered to himself. He is your nephew. How can he not know how to use a sword? Yes, this was indeed an accident. An accident that was out of everyone's expectations. When the Third Prince told all the kings about the Human Emperor plan, they all thought that the Third Prince did not know how to fight, and that the plan was not reliable. But when the Third Prince said, "My uncle is Sword Saint," everyone was instantly convinced. Because this was too King reasonable and convincing. No one thought that Sword Saint's nephew could not learn how to use a sword. The Pope was shocked for a while, and finally sighed slowly. It was useless to say anything now. The arrow had already left the bow, and it was already halfway out. It was meaningless to blame him for not shooting properly. But thinking about it carefully, it was not his fault. This was the result of people's arrogance. The son of the leader of the Woolene Alliance must be powerful. The son of the leader of the literary world must be brilliant. The son of a farmer could plant rice, and the son of a blacksmith could make fire. Then the nephew of Sword Saint, of course, must be a rare genius in the art of swordsmanship. This was the ingrained prejudice of human beings. It had always been in everyone's bones, and it never faded away. Even the Third Prince himself probably believed that he could become a master swordsman back then. How can this be? Staya still could not accept this fact. She kept talking. Bane was only with you for a few days, and the Third Prince, they are not the same. The Sword Saint looked at Staya and said, Bane came from a tragic background, but he was brave, tough, and calm. He dared to break into the palace alone at night. Although his art of swordsmanship was not high, he was smart. As for you, I don't need to tell you. But as far as I know, the Guy family is also a big family in the Middle Empire. The Sword Saint must have lived a comfortable life since he was young, Staya said. This means that your intelligence was not much better than the Third Prince's, but you are the strongest swordsman in the world. I am different from him. The Sword Saint looked at the Third Prince, who was wearing a yellow dragon robe, with a complicated look in his eyes. Everyone says that nephews are like their uncles. How can you be different? The Pope asked. I am a genius in the art of swordsmanship. The Sword Saint looked at the Pope and said seriously. Although this was something that was universally acknowledged, it still made people feel uncomfortable to hear it from his own mouth. The Pope was also a bit embarrassed. He coughed lightly and looked at the Sword Saint. You are really arrogant. This is only the truth. Then, is your nephew's talent that terrible? Even I feel like I don't know where to start. That's really tragic. Yes. Did you not put in the effort? The Pope started to speculate about the Sword Saint. He is the hope of the human race. Even if we don't talk about this, is also my nephew. I have to do my best. Do you not have a good relationship with your sister? She is my sister. We relied on each other since we were young. The Saintess just said that the Guy family is a big family. Do you think the life of a big family is easy? Is it because you're too busy? What did you not notice? The 7 direct disciples of the Sword Mountain are all very talented and have solid swordsmanship. I haven't done anything else during this time. Just practice swordsmanship with the Golden King? Of course. Even that is not allowed. During this time, my 7 disciples told me all kinds of reasons, and then 6 of them went into seclusion. This Golden King is really something. Teaching him swordsmanship made the direct disciples of the Sword Mountain go into seclusion? Yes, God is playing with us. Shut up. How can you say this at this time? True. Look, in the end, Staia's exclamation interrupted the conversation between the Sword Saint and the Pope. It didn't seem like much, but it was actually related to the world. The Sword Saint and the Pope heard this and looked towards the altar. They didn't know when, but 5 pillars of light suddenly appeared on the ground and shot straight into the sky. The 5 pillars of light came from the Golden King's sword, the War King's spear, the Wisdom King's book, the Iron Blood King's gem, the Hero King's scale. These 5 items were the national weapons of the 5 empires. They were treasures that could suppress the fate of a nation. Suddenly, a huge gust of wind blew, and the weather changed drastically. The sky suddenly turned pitch black. No one knew where so many black clouds came from and gathered above everyone's heads. And they were still spinning. Not long after, they turned into a black whirlpool. The 5 yellow pillars of light entered the center of the whirlpool. Everyone looked up at the sky, their hearts filled with shock. They could feel that in the sky, something opened its eyes and looked at them, as if it was looking directly into their souls. They were all seen through, but no matter how they looked in the sky, they couldn't find any trace of a living creature. The black clouds kept spinning, like a hole that could never be filled. The golden light continued to shine, as if it was endless. Just like this, it continued for the time it took to burn a stick of incense. The golden light slowly faded. Staia's heart moved. She could feel that the cannon of light was different. But the sky didn't calm down. The gust of wind seemed to be more violent. There seemed to be lightning flashing in the black clouds, and there were a few rumbling sounds of thunder. Then, a 5-meter-thick pillar of light fell from the center of the black clouds. It shrouded the 3rd prince. The Pope was a little dumbfounded. He thought to himself that it actually worked. Suddenly, there was a burst of noise. Countless voices suddenly sounded on the peak of this small cloud-covered mountain, as if there were countless people standing here. They were all talking. Their voices resounded through the world, deafening, as if they were close at hand, but they couldn't see them. The sound of reading, talking, roaring, cursing, laughing, crying, it was the sound of people. It was the sound of countless people. It was the sound of the whole world. It was the sound of smoke and fire in the human world. When a human emperor was born, the sound of the whole human race would gather here to witness the birth of the human emperor. The huge pillar of light slowly dissipated. The sky became clear again in a very short time. It vanished into thin air, as if the dreamlike scene before was all fake. But the Golden King didn't think so. The Golden King stood up. First, he looked at his palm, then at the ground under his feet, and then at the distant sky. Liu smiled slowly. The world was different in his eyes. October 10th, 2050, light calendar. The human emperor was born. Yun Mountain ascended the throne. The light calendar. Chapter 298. The Golden King looked at the entire world. The world had never been so clear in his eyes before. Countless spots of light flowed in the air. Those were the elements. The Golden King extended his hand toward those spots of light. Countless spots of light gathered in his hand. He could control those elements. This world was really different. The Golden King felt as if he could converse with some kind of existence in this world. A gust of wind. The Golden King thought to himself. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew over the mountaintop. Some rain. The Golden King thought again. The light drizzle miraculously sprinkled on the mountaintop. However, it was fleeting. The amount of rain, the size of the raindrops, and the feeling of the rain hitting his face were all the same as what the Golden King had imagined. The Golden King took a deep breath and suppressed his excitement. He could summon the wind and rain and command the world. Was this the power of the human emperor? In this way, wouldn't all humans be able to enjoy good weather every year and have a bountiful harvest every year? Everyone would be able to eat their fill, and the Luo River flood would no longer be a problem. People would no longer have to suffer from droughts and floods. Wasn't this the dream of every emperor? Now they could finally great. The Golden King shouted excitedly. Did it work? The other 4 emperors had already stood up and asked one after another. It worked, the Golden King said with absolute certainty. At this moment, countless human voices were ringing in his mind, but he didn't find it noisy. He could feel a majestic aura that filled the world growing vigorously. Everywhere he looked, it was the same everywhere. It was as if it really filled the entire world. That was the light from providence of the human race, and also his power. When he summoned the wind and rain just now, he clearly felt that the aura had decreased a little. However, compared to the entire human race's light from providence, it was insignificant. In a short span of time, the light from providence that had been consumed had already risen back. The light from providence of the human race was still growing. Was this the race that occupied almost the entire world? It was indeed powerful. Come. The Battle King stretched out a hand and looked at the Golden King with a burning gaze. He suddenly said, I have to experience the power of the human sovereign for myself. The Golden King looked at the warlord, eager to give it a try. However, he suddenly turned his head to the west and said to the warlord, Let's go back later. We have guests. Guest. The War King mimicked the Golden King's actions and looked to the west. He focused his gaze, but all he could see were white clouds. Where were the guests? The Battle King looked at the Golden King in confusion. His expression was solemn, as if he had really seen something. The Battle King frowned and looked to the west. His eyes suddenly widened, because this time he could see clearly that a black shadow was flying towards him from within the white clouds. Huge membranous wings, a long tail, a strong and ferocious tail. That was a dragon. The momentum was terrifying, as if it was going to destroy the world. Everyone watched in shock as the red disaster drew closer and closer. He had even forgotten about running away. But the Golden King didn't. He didn't know why. He didn't know if he could defeat the red disaster. However, he felt that he was fearless. Jilin quickly flew to the peak of Mount Yunpa. His golden eyes reflected the 100 or so humans. He opened his teeth slightly. With a flap of his wings, a gust of wind blew. Everyone was instantly blown away, and they were in a panic. If they were blown down by this gust of wind, given the height of Mount Yunpa, there was no chance of survival. They would only end up being smashed to pieces. Seeing this, the Golden King narrowed his eyes and raised his hand slightly. In an instant, the wind calmed down. Jilin also narrowed his eyes. Now, he knew who the powerhouse that had suddenly appeared was, but he was a little surprised. Brother Long, it's been a long time since we parted in the capital. The third prince stepped forward and faced the red disaster directly as he spoke loudly. At this moment, his figure was so imposing and tall that it was incomparably tall. It was as if he wanted to use his own strength to block the red disaster that occupied half the sky for everyone. Iron Blood King, War King, Sword Saint, Pope, Staya, Sagely King. The humans behind the Golden King looked at this scene with great emotion. Now, the humanity was facing the red calamity. Was there finally someone who was qualified enough to stand up? Humans had waited for this day for far too long. Yes, it's been a long time. Jilin looked at the third prince and said, In that case, Brother Long, can you come down for a chat? The third prince said with a smile. Jilin was stunned. He knew that the third prince was asking for an equal position. What an arrogant human. But that's fine. Jilin thought to himself. He had already turned into his human form and stood at the peak of Mount Yunpa in front of the third prince. The giant dragon disappeared and was replaced by an ordinary, young man with red hair and golden eyes. These clothes don't look as good as the ones you wore before. Jilin looked at the bright yellow dragon robe on the third prince and said, "It doesn't match." Speaking of which, it's all thanks to Brother Long. The third prince cupped his hands and bowed. If it wasn't for Brother Long, I wouldn't be where I am today. It's nothing. I was paid to do this. Jilin didn't think much of it. Then, Jilin looked at Xueqing, who was standing behind the third prince. He raised his hand as a greeting. This woman had also changed a lot. She was completely different from when she was selling cloth at the cloth store. She was wearing a bright red dress with a golden phoenix embroidered on it. She was wearing a pure gold phoenix coronet that Jilin wanted to take away at first glance. That thing was bigger than her head. He really didn't know why she was wearing it. Miss Xueqing smiled and performed an extremely standard squatting salute. She was no longer the same as before. She was extremely noble. In this world, other than the third prince, only the inhuman Jilin could receive such a bow from her. Xueqing is honored to be remembered by Prince Long. Well said. Jilin nodded slightly at her. When they were in the capital, Jilin admired Xueqing very much. There weren't many women who could be rejected by a rich, powerful, and handsome man like the third prince. She could be considered a clear stream in the human world. Xueqing, you finally succeeded. Jilin looked at the third prince. This is all thanks to Brother Long. The third prince cupped his hands and smiled like a fool. How did you suddenly become so powerful? Jilin asked. This is a secret of the human race. Please forgive me, Brother Long, the third prince said. I can tell even if you don't tell me. Jilin smiled in disdain. He turned his head and looked at Staya, who was standing at the back. You're leaving because of this? No, Staya said. I'm leaving to tell the humans that you want to take half of the world. Do you think it's unreasonable? Jilin tilted his head. The world is only so big. Humans take up almost all of it. Can't we split it between the different races? I don't think so, Staya said. Tieske. Jilin rubbed his hair and looked at Staya. I admit that the third prince is very powerful now. He's completely beyond what humans can achieve. But do you really think he can defeat me? Once he dies, the luck of the human race will instantly disappear. Even I don't know what will happen then. It's such a huge risk. Are you sure? I have no choice, the third prince said. The other emperors looked at the third young master with a look of approval. How accurate was that? If they had no choice, who would lend their country's weapon to you? Jilin lowered his head and sighed. He shook his head gently. He glanced at the third prince and then looked at the sky. He turned around and looked at the entire world. Then, his gaze swept across the country's weapons. The Middle Empire's 9-cauldron sword. The Snow Wind Empire's Stone of Truth. The Nanshin Empire's War God Spear. The Saimai Empire's Holy Bible of Light. The Divine Dragon Empire's Water Dragon King's Scale. Tisk. Jilin clenched his teeth and clenched his tongue. He took a step forward and appeared in front of the Hero King as though he had teleported. His arm had already pierced through the Hero King's chest. He had completely pierced through the Hero King's chest. Jilin! Staya shouted, hoping to stop Jilin. However, it was meaningless. By the time she shouted, the Hero King was already on the verge of death. The Hero King spat out a mouthful of blood that landed on Jilin's arm. His eyes were still blank. Jilin was too fast. Even now, the Hero King had yet to react. It was too sudden. A second ago, Jilin was still calmly talking to the three dukes and Staya. The next moment, he had killed the Hero King. There was no transition in between. If people were to describe a person as cruel and violent, they would often say that they would kill someone at the slightest disagreement. Now, Jilin had even skipped the slightest disagreement process. Jilin's arm burst into flames, instantly burning away the blood that had landed on his arm. At the same time, it burned the Hero King to nothingness. Jilin reached out to grab the Water Dragon King scale that had fallen and carefully put it away. He looked at everyone present and nodded with a smile. Coupled with his current appearance, he seemed to be a little shy and bashful. A golden beam of light suddenly bloomed, illuminating the entire Cloud Pagoda Mountain. It was a punch delivered by the third prince with all his strength. It was the combined attack of all humanity. The strength of more than 1 billion humans gathered together as the third prince delivered this punch. Lin was sent flying. For a moment, he was stunned. He was sent flying by a human? Lin was enraged as he instantly transformed back into his true form. He opened his mouth wide and aimed it at the peak of Cloud Pagoda Mountain. A red beam of light lit up in his mouth. He wanted to release his dragon breath. He wanted to blast everyone on Cloud Pagoda Mountain into smoke. He wanted to destroy the entire mountain. That's not right. Staya was still around. A thought flashed through Jilin's mind as he suddenly noticed this matter. His actions of releasing his dragon breath immediately slowed down. And at the instant he paused, a golden dragon soared into the sky. It bit down on Jilin's shoulder and flew him into the distance, leaving Cloud Pagoda Mountain. Jilin looked at the creature in front of him. It had a long body like a snake and was covered in scales like his. It had 5 eagle claws and no wings, but could fly in the sky. Furthermore, it was not slow. It had a pair of deer-like horns on its head. It looked nothing like him. However, Jilin knew that in the Middle Empire's concept, this thing was like him. It was called a dragon. It was the same as the clothes that the third prince had previously worn. This was the totem of the Middle Empire. Now that the third prince had become human emperor, he could transform into a totem. Jilin roared as he stabbed his sharp claws into the golden dragon's body. He forcefully pulled the thing away from his body and threw it far away. The golden dragon was far away from Jilin, appearing and disappearing in the clouds. Even Jilin could not find its true body for a while. So this was what the saying, elusive dragon, meant. Jilin looked at the golden dragon and thought, "What's wrong? Weren't you created by humans to deal with me? Why aren't you coming?" Jilin asked. The third prince did not answer. He just hid in the clouds and occasionally stuck his head out to spit out lightning, causing sparks to fly from Jilin's body. It looked terrifying, but it was actually useless. "You can't do this." Jilin smiled. "In the battle between you and me, we have to talk with our claws and teeth. Don't hide. Come on." The golden dragon was really obedient. With a long roar, it rushed out of the clouds and went straight for Jilin's back. It turned out that the golden dragon was not angered by Jilin. Instead, it thought that it had found an opportunity to launch a sneak attack. Jilin smiled again. The third prince did not know that a dragon could see his back at the peak of Cloud Cover Mountain. Everyone saw the third prince turn into a golden dragon and soar into the sky. Their blood was boiling, and they were unable to hold back their excitement. They looked at the sky for a long time and could not speak to themselves. Sword Saint looked at the direction the golden dragon left and muttered to himself, "Minging, brother finally didn't let you down." The Pope blinked. He was also shocked. It seems that if he doesn't know how to use the sword, it's useless. Looking at the Golden King just now, it seems like he can't even hold a sword. It's not that he can't learn, he's just too smart and slick. Sword Saint said, "That's true. After all, he grew up in Spring Phoenix Brothel." Ouyang Ju had appeared beside Sword Saint at some point in time. It seemed that although the old man was old, he was still able to see things clearly. In this place, this was the safest place. "You still have the cheek to say that." Sword Saint glared at Ouyang Ju. "Lord Sword Saint, aren't you worried that the third prince won't be able to defeat Jilin?" Staya finally could not stand it when she saw the group of people talking excitedly. "I've done my best, and leave the rest to fate," the Pope said. "I've done my best. Whether I succeed or not, that's up to the heavens. It's not up to me." As the Pope spoke, he walked to the spot where the Hero King was standing. He thought to himself, "Not a single speck of dust is left. Do I still need to pray for you?" Deep in the mountains and forests of the Middle Empire, this was a place that was very far away from human settlements. There were tall mountains everywhere, and no one was around. Suddenly, a huge golden figure descended from the sky and crashed into a mountain range with a loud rumble. The mountains shook. The earth trembled. Hundreds of beasts panicked, and flocks of birds flew away. The huge golden dragon turned into specks of golden light and disappeared. Instead, the yellow-robed third young master was half kneeling on the ground, leaning on the 9 cauldron sword in the middle of the rubble. Drops of blood flowed from the corner of the third prince's mouth. Tick-tock, tick-tock. It dripped onto the yellow gravel below the third prince, splashing red flowers one after another. He had lost. Chapter 299. The third prince looked at the blood on the ground, chuckled, and shook his head. He had spent countless resources of the human race, and the 5 empires had worked together to allow him to ascend to the throne of the human emperor. From the beginning, he had wasted a lot of effort. However, he thought that all of this was worth it just now, because the human race had used their own strength to create a god in the world, a god that belonged to the human race. He could summon the wind and rain and transform into a dragon. How good! From now on, the human race's life would no longer depend on the mood of the heavens. People were finally able to stand up and live freely as they wished. It should be like this. However, before his beautiful dream could last any longer, it was mercilessly shattered by reality. The red disaster fell from the sky, and he lost just like that, even though the fate of all the humans was on his shoulders, even though the power of all the humans was on him. But he still couldn't beat him. How useless. Me. If it was his uncle or the warlord, it would probably be different, right? Jilin descended from the sky, transformed into his human form, and landed in front of the third prince. Jilin's landing set off a circular wave of air. Countless small gravel was blown into the air. The earth shook and sand and stones flew. What are you thinking? Jilin looked at the third prince. Fighting with claws and teeth isn't a habit of you humans, right? The third prince glared at Jilin and stood up with his long sword. Brother Long is right. As the third prince spoke, he had already raised a 9 cauldron sword and slashed at Jilin. Golden light shone brightly, like the summer sun. A semi-solitary, huge blade of light that was taller than a mountain range slashed at Jilin as if it was going to split the world. The human emperor, who had gathered the power of the entire human race, had the help of the power of heaven and earth with every move. Its power was unparalleled. The golden light faded, and a mountain range had already been cut in half. The human emperor's sword could cut a mountain in half. It's quite powerful. It's different with a sword. If I were to receive this attack, I'm afraid that even I would be injured. Jilin's frivolous voice sounded in the third prince's ears. It's a pity that you're too slow. You didn't hit him. The third prince was shocked. He wanted to swing his sword in the direction of the sound, but his wrist refused to listen to him. He couldn't move his arm. This was because a pure white hand had already grabbed it firmly. Look at you. You're clearly a human, yet you're fighting me like a beast. You clearly don't know how to use a sword, yet you're waving your sword around. Jilin held the third prince's wrist tightly, making it impossible for him to break free. Don't humans always say that we should play to our strengths and avoid our weaknesses? Aren't you doing the exact opposite? Could it be that you look down on me? The third prince knew that he couldn't break free, so he clenched his free hand into a fist and punched at Jilin's face with all his strength. The moment he punched out, it was as if there was an explosion of thunder between heaven and earth. A force of impact passed through Jilin's body and plowed a deep hole behind Jilin's back. It was an extremely terrifying punch. If this punch didn't hit Jilin's face, but hit the original palace gate of the Middle Empire's Imperial Palace, it was estimated that a few more punches would be able to blast the palace gate away. In terms of strength alone, the third prince had indeed come into contact with Jilin to a certain extent. Fighting isn't your forte. You have strength, but don't know how to use it. So there really are people like you. Jilin didn't even dodge and took the terrifying punch of the third prince. Jilin narrowed his eyes and tilted his head back slightly. His teeth felt a little numb. Jilin raised his hand and returned a punch of the third prince. A gust of wind blew through the third prince's body, blowing away countless pieces of gravel behind the third prince. Countless trees were blown down. The third prince was not sent flying because Jilin was holding him back. Jilin let go, and the third prince seemed to have lost all his strength. With a plop sound, he fell to the ground and panted heavily. He struggled for a long time, but was unable to get up. Jilin looked at the third prince who was lying on the ground and thought to himself, as expected, this was the first time he had used all his strength to beat up a human. Furthermore, the other party didn't die and his body wasn't penetrated. This was all within Jilin's expectations. I say, what are you doing? Jilin squatted down in front of the third prince and crossed his arms. He looked like an ordinary man who was squatting by the side of the road and chatting with someone. We haven't seen each other for a long time. Why did you suddenly attack me? I don't remember offending you, right? I even helped you. Could it be that you want to test your newly obtained strength on me? It's because of you. You killed the Divine Dragon Empire's emperor for no reason. The third prince couldn't get up when he came, so he could only lie on the ground. That person is the Divine Dragon Empire's emperor? Jilin was stunned. Yes, the Hero King. The third prince said, the various emperors of the various empires came with their national weapons to help me ascend to the throne. However, the Hero King actually died in my Middle Empire? How do you want me to explain this to the people of the world? Just say that I killed him. The world will understand and not blame you, Jilin said. Most of the people in the world don't know of your existence, the third prince said. It can't be, right? Jilin was shocked. I thought I'd been causing a lot of trouble all these years. The various empires have all sealed off information about you. Most of the people who saw you up close are dead. Therefore, the people of the various empires don't know of your existence, except for a very small number of people. Even when I was in Spring Breeze Restaurant, I didn't hear about you. Jilin remained silent. He thought to himself, you drank and got drunk all day in Spring Breeze Restaurant. What would you know? However, he had done many big things in the past few years. Every time he appeared, he would make a high-profile entrance and expose himself in front of everyone. The spectators numbered in the tens of thousands. There were so many people, but the third prince called it a very small number. That's right. Compared to the total number of humans, it was indeed a very small number. At this moment, Jilin, who was a dragon, once again expressed his envy of the human race's reproductive ability. Then how do you explain the traces I left behind? Jilin asked. A natural disaster, of course, the third prince said. Only a natural disaster can explain it. The Adventurers Guild has always had a mission of the highest level, Jilin said. That mission was to explore the volcanoes in the west of the Saimai Empire. We didn't say you were there, the third prince said. You high and mighty humans have deceived the common people, Jilin said. It has always been like this, the third prince said. Don't you think it's unfair? Human Emperor, Jilin said. What's fair and unfair? The third prince said. They also have a right to know the truth. At the very least, they should know of my existence, Jilin said. Yes, of course they do. But they don't need it, the third prince said. They said it? Jilin smiled. No, we said it. The third prince finally struggled to sit up. They only need to live a peaceful and happy life. Let us, the higher-ups, spare the rest. Don't you think you're being too self-righteous? Jilin said. Deceit after embellishment is still deceit. The third prince shook his head and clutched his aching chest. It was where Jilin had hit him. If we're talking about self-righteousness, the successive monarchs of the Middle Empire all call themselves the true dragon son of heaven. In other words, they are both the dragon and the son of the heavens. Compared to my ancestors, I think I'm all right. It's not too much. As for the deceit you mentioned, I don't think so. Then continue deceiving them. Just say that the Hero King fell down on a whim. Enough. Brother Long, why did you kill the Hero King? Because he had a dragon scale in his hand? Jilin took out the Divine Dragon Empire's national weapon and showed it to the third prince. There are countless flying dragons in the Divine Dragon Empire. So what if he has a dragon scale? No, this dragon scale belongs to my race's Water Dragon King. Any creature that hides a dragon scale and uses it without permission will suffer the dragon race's revenge. They will die without a burial ground. You haven't heard of it, right? The third prince shook his head. Of course, he had never heard of it. The humans must have put in a lot of effort to create you, right? Jilin asked. Of course, the third prince said. All of humanity's providence is concentrated on one person. The rise and fall of the entire race depends on one person. Humans are really daring. Jilin sighed as he looked at the third prince. When the third prince attacked for the first time, he understood. Huh. To be honest, I don't know much about Providence. Could it be that Brother Long knows a thing or two about it? The third prince felt stunned. Yes. Jilin nodded. There is indeed such a thing in the dragon race's bloodline inheritance. Your current situation is not good. Brother Long. The third prince looked at Jilin. Can we not fight this war? The third prince's words were shocking. Even Jilin was shocked. I know that Brother Long cares about the world. As the Beast King, you naturally can't sit by and do nothing when you see the suffering of the Beastmen. However, if you want the Beastmen to eat their fill and live a good life, war is not the only way. No, it will be better to say that war will not achieve your goal. War will not allow people to obtain anything. It will only destroy everything. What do you mean? Jilin frowned. Brother Long, why do you think the Beastmen have such a hard life? The third prince asked. It is because you humans have occupied all the resources and forced the Beastmen into a barren wasteland. Jilin said. No. The third prince pretended to be deep. You mother asterisk cur. Jilin saw the third prince's expression and became angry. The third prince saw that Jilin was anxious and hurriedly said, if we are talking about the bad environment, the Snow Wind Empire is worse than the wasteland. Then why can the people of the Snow Wind Empire live in peace? The Snow Wind Empire is also one of the 5 great empires, and no one dares to look down on it? Jilin blinked. Because humans have thick clothes and methods to keep warm. That's right. The third prince said, the reason why humans live well is because we know how to create. We know how to make clothes. We know how to farm. We know how to raise livestock. We know how to make tools. This is the reason why humans live well. As for the Beastmen, I have never seen them. May I ask Brother Long, do the Beastmen know how to farm? Jilin shook his head. It seems that only humans know how to do this. That's why giving the Beastmen land won't change their lives. The third prince said sincerely, Brother Long, I know that you are very confident about the war and feel that you will definitely agree. Indeed, I've tried and I can't beat you. However, if you want half of the human race's land, you will have to start a war that will sweep across the world. At that time, the human race will definitely resist. After the war, even if half of the land falls into your hands, it will only be a wasteland. It will be useless. Brother Long, with our relationship, what can we talk about? Do we have to fight? War is a thankless endeavor. That's enough. Jilin covered the third prince's mouth. You said it so well. I didn't expect the third prince to be so smooth after ascending the throne. You humans spent a lot of effort to create a human emperor just to kill me. Now that you have tried, you feel that you can't beat me. That's why you're telling me this? The third prince, aren't you thinking too lightly? The third prince shook his head hard and tried to make a sound. Jilin let go of his hand. Brother Long, you just need to know if what I said makes sense. The third prince said, as long as Brother Long promises not to let the Beastmen attack the human race's territory. I promise that after 5 years, there will not be another Beastman who starves to death. The Beastmen can also live a peaceful and normal life. A peaceful and normal life. That is what you humans pursue, Jilin said. Then what do the Beastmen pursue? To fight bravely and die honorably. I think that they're forced to do so. They have no choice. How can the dream of life be to die honorably and not live comfortably? The third prince said, Brother Long, give the Beastmen a chance to choose. Jilin frowned. He was obviously wavering. The third prince was right. War did not seem to be able to change the Beastmen's lives. I also promise that from now on, no human will step into Brother Long's territory and disturb Brother Long's sleep. The third prince followed up with another attack. TSK. Jilin closed his eyes. If Brother Long agrees, I will get someone to give you 10,000 jars of strong liquor and half of the remaining gold of the Middle Empire. Okay. Jilin's eyes suddenly opened. How are you going to let the Beastmen live the kind of life you mentioned? The Beastmen don't eat food and don't like to eat vegetables. Then teach them how to raise livestock. They can't even fill their own stomachs. How are they going to raise livestock? Raise cattle and sheep. Those things eat grass. There is no grass in the wilderness, only endless sandstorms. Plant trees. More trees can block the sandstorms. There is no water in the wilderness. I can summon wind and rain now. I will go to the wilderness and make it rain for a month. Not to mention water, I can even make a few rivers for you. That can work. That is a good idea. Of course. The third prince is really straightforward. Brother Long, you flatter me. However, the third prince, after thinking about it, I still want to kill you. Brother Long, why do you say that? The third prince was shocked. Why do you say that? The third prince, you are very powerful now. You just got the power of the human emperor. You have such strength without knowing how to use it. You are really amazing. Then, you will be able to use it well in the future. If you can defeat me by then, won't I be in danger? So, just in case, I have to kill you now to prevent future troubles. You should understand me, right? Jilin looked at the third prince and said with a smile. He punched the third prince and sent him flying, crashing into a small hill. Chapter 300. The third prince, I really don't know if your luck is good or bad. Jilin approached the third prince step by step. Usually, when I want to kill humans, I can make them die painlessly. Even if they die, they won't realize it. How good is that? But you can't. You have the fate of the entire human race on you. I can't kill you with a single blow. So, you can only be painfully beaten to death by me. I'm sorry. Brother Long, why do you have to do this? The third prince stood up and pointed the 9-cauldron sword at Jilin. Once you and I have formed an alliance, we can stay out of each other's business. Brother Long, do you really want to fight me to the death? The human race created you to kill me. If you can defeat me in the future, why don't you come looking for me? Jilin said. Besides, with your current strength, we can't fight to the death. If I die and it rains in the wilderness, what will you do? The third prince asked. I can handle such a small matter, Jilin said. Brother Long, you don't want the gold anymore? If I kill you, I can get it myself. Brother Long, let me give you a piece of advice. Don't be too ruthless. Actually, I don't want to kill you. After all, you and I know each other. There aren't many humans that I can remember. But countless human history tells me that I have to kill you now to prevent me from regretting it in the future. I have to learn from history. What history? The third prince's eyes flashed with lightning. He was prepared. If Jilin really wanted to attack, he could only fight to the death. Well, legend has it that there was an emperor called Jie. He summoned a person called Tang to a place called Xiatai. Jie could have killed Tang, but he didn't. Instead, Jie released Tang. Later, Tang led his soldiers to overthrow Jie's rule and replace him. He became the new emperor. Jie said something at the end. What words? The third prince asked. I regret that I did not kill Tang Yu and Xiatai, and thus ended up like this. Jilin said slowly, pausing after every word. His tone was like that of an emperor who was at the end of his rope, standing on top of the palace, facing countless rebels and traitors. He was regretting his soft-heartedness back then. That was a regret that couldn't be washed away even with all the water in the 5 lakes and 3 rivers. Third young master was stunned. He originally thought that Jilin was just spouting nonsense, casually making up a story to kill him. But when he heard Jilin's last sentence, he knew that it wasn't a lie. With Jilin's level of education, he would not be able to come up with something like that. How is it? The third prince, you are now an emperor. Can you hear the deep unwillingness and regret in those words? Jilin asked. The third prince nodded. Of course, he could hear it. The third prince wasn't good at listening to others, but he was better than Jilin. But then again, humans really don't like to learn from history. There are clearly precedents like this, but the latecomers are still making the same mistakes over and over again, without the slightest improvement. Jilin lamented. What do you mean? The third prince asked. After many years, a person called Zhou appeared. He called Shibo to Chaoga City. He didn't kill him. Then, Shibo rebelled and succeeded. In the end, Zhou ascended the Deer Terrace and died in the fire. Qin Shi Huang was once a hostage in Zhao and was in a precarious situation. Later, he was lucky enough to escape back to Qin. After some things, he finally destroyed the other 6 countries, including Zhao. The hegemon of Western Chu once invited Liu Bang to Hongmen for a meal, but he didn't kill him. In the end, the hegemon committed suicide in Wu River. Before he died, he said that he was too ashamed to face his elders in Jiangdong. Cao Cao and Liu Bei drank wine and talked about heroes. Later, Liu Bei was released from Xuchang. Therefore, the opportunity to unify the world was completely lost. Brother Long, why don't I understand what you're saying? Who is Qin Shi Huang? Who is Liu Bei? Where is Qin? Which one is Zhao? The third prince was confused. He thought that Brother Long said it with a nose and eyes. Why haven't I heard of it? Although I'm not good at learning, I can't be worse than a dragon. It's normal that you don't understand. Jilin spread out his hands. It doesn't matter who Qin Shi Huang is or who Liu Bei is. It didn't matter where the state of Qin was or where the state of Zhao was. What's important is that we learn painful lessons from those regrettable things. The third prince, what kind of truth do the things I said before reveal to us? Tell me, Jilin said. The third prince held his sword and stared at Jilin. He didn't say anything. He was fully focused and ready to fight, because he understood Jilin's meaning. He was also an emperor. He could easily put himself in the shoes of the people Jilin mentioned. The third prince felt that if he let someone go and caused the destruction of the Middle Empire, he would definitely regret it so much that his intestines would turn green. He wished that he could turn back time. If he could turn back time and put himself in the shoes of others, the third prince felt that Jie would definitely kill Tang, and Zhou would kill Shibo. Zhao Guhui suffocated Qin Shi Huang in a quilt before he grew up. As for the remaining two, needless to say, they would definitely poison each other's drinks. No, the hegemon of Western Chu's name sounded very impressive. He probably wouldn't do such a tasteless thing. However, the one called Cao Cao would probably do it. He completely understood Jilin's meaning. Humans are stupid. They do not learn from their history, as evidenced by the striking similarity of all periods of history. But I'm different. I'm a smart dragon. As Jilin spoke, he had already nimbly dodged the 5 slashes of the third prince. Although the third prince's sword had the power to destroy heaven and earth, splitting mountains and rivers was not a problem. But he missed all of them. The third prince's swordsmanship was really unflattering. In Jilin's eyes, it couldn't even be considered swordsmanship. It was just waving the sword around casually. Jilin was proficient in swordsmanship. It could even be said that his swordsmanship was divine. Back then, he had seen the sword saint use a sword. In just a few moments, he had completely learned the sword saint's swordsmanship. Jilin knocked the third prince to the ground with a punch. Then he stepped on the third prince's stomach and punched him repeatedly. This was the fist technique of the king of fighters, Musin. Every punch contained the full strength of the Megalosaurus. Every punch shook the earth and mountains. With the first punch, a huge pit instantly appeared on the ground. Then, the pit became deeper and deeper. The third prince had the luck of the human race protecting him. Jilin had to fight for a while before he could kill the third prince. Jilin spoke as he fought. The third prince was completely speechless. Those stories tell us that a tiger raised will be a disaster sooner or later. Those who like to play with fire will burn themselves sooner or later. Except for me. When facing an enemy, quickly kill if you can. Don't cause trouble for yourself. Don't play the game of being merciful and cherishing each other. I know that you humans want to deal with me because I have the ability to threaten the entire human race. That's a threat theory. You want to nip the thread in the bud. I can understand. Similarly, I want to kill you now because you have the ability to threaten me. You can understand, right? You're a pretty good human. It's a pity. By the way, you're about to die. Do you have any last words? Humans have the habit of saying their last words, right? You can tell me. I'll try my best to help you. Jilin suddenly remembered that the third prince hadn't said his last words. He suddenly stopped and looked at the third prince, who was more out of breath than in, and asked. The third prince was indeed the human emperor who gathered all the luck of the human race. After being beaten by Jilin for so long, not only was he not dead, but he was also conscious. The third prince opened his mouth, but didn't say anything. He tilted his head and spat out a mouthful of blood. His throat was blocked by blood. The third prince coughed twice and looked at Jilin. He said weakly, "Brother Long, You seem to have a lot to say today. I don't remember you being like this. Are you convincing yourself? Yes. Jilin didn't deny it. Then did you succeed in convincing yourself? The third prince asked. I succeeded. Jilin said. So if you have any last words, say it quickly. Tell me, which prince will you pass the throne to? I promise to let him inherit your throne. Cough, cough. Thank you for your trouble, Brother Long, the third prince smiled. His face was pale and bloodless. He was really going to die. But I don't have any princes yet. That can't be, Jilin said. I heard you have 3 palaces and 6 courtyards and 72 concubines. I've only been on the throne for less than 2 years. The third prince said, I only have the empress. What a pity. Jilin sighed. Hee hee, Brother Long, will you regret killing me? The third prince suddenly laughed. Regretting killing you is better than regretting not killing you. Jilin said, Brother Long, you're right. The third prince was stunned for a moment. I really misjudged you. Jilin stared at the third prince. Oh, what do you mean? The third prince tried his best to cooperate with Jilin. He grinned, revealing his blood-red teeth. I thought you would cry out of fear and beg me for mercy, Jilin said. The third prince was silent. He quietly looked at Jilin, the biggest disaster for humanity. After a long silence, he slowly said, I want to cry too. I'm scared too. But I'm the Golden King. I can't lose face like this. Brother Long knows that the people of the Middle Empire care about face the most. Very good. You've improved a lot. You're like a hero now, Jilin said. Then I'll send you on your way. Do you really not have any important last words? If you do, say it now. I'm in a good mood and can help you. I want the Middle Empire to be peaceful forever. I want the people of the human race to live a happy life. Can Brother Long help me with these 2 things? Jilin shook his head. Are you kidding me? Jilin flew into the sky and transformed into a megalosaurus. He looked at the bottomless circular pit directly below him. He had personally created it bit by bit. The third prince was lying in the center of the pit. Jilin looked at the third prince. The third prince also looked at Jilin. Jilin opened his mouth and aimed at the third prince. He wanted to use a dragon's breath to send the third prince on his way. That way, the third prince would suffer less. Just now, the protection of the human race's providence had been used up a lot. Jilin believed that the dragon's breath would be enough to take care of the rest. Unfortunately, the Emperor of Man was about to fall after just 1 day of his birth. Buzz, the dragon's breath, was released. A crimson beam of light was spat out from Jilin's mouth. The beam of light was even larger than Jilin himself. It shot straight into the pit that Jilin had created. Boom, the earth shook. The sturdy trees that were usually proud and unafraid of wind and rain were now as fragile as wheat. They fell as the wind blew. Then they began to burn. The entire forest was burning. The flames were so great that it was as if they were going to burn the world down. After a long while, Jilin retracted his dragon's breath. Looking at the fire that was spreading and getting more and more intense, he suddenly had an idea. Extinguish. Within a radius of dozens of miles, the huge fire that was billowing smoke was instantly extinguished. Jilin slowly descended and landed at the bottom of the pit. This was the center of the dragon's breath attack. It was also the place with the highest temperature. The surrounding stones had become transparent due to the high temperature, and they were also brightly colored, just like the walls of the Red Dragon Palace. Jilin transformed into his human form. His golden eyes lit up like 2 lamps, shining on the transparent stones around him. Jilin activated his golden eyes. He was looking for traces of the third prince. Jilin lowered his head and looked around, but he found nothing. Nothing. Nothing at all. Could it be that he had been vaporized? That shouldn't be the case. He had the providence of the human race protecting him. There should be something left behind. For example, ashes. It could also be the remnant of the human race's providence in the third prince's body that had been calcined at high temperature and then condensed into a crystal, or in human terms, a relic. For someone like the third prince, who gathered the providence of the entire race and had faith in him, there would definitely be a relic after his death. And that thing wasn't afraid of fire. Moreover, Jilin had controlled the temperature of the dragon's breath just now. It hadn't reached the level where it could melt the relic. However, this place was completely empty. There was nothing at all. There was only one possibility. The third prince had run away. Although this was unbelievable, there was a good saying. After eliminating all the impossibilities, the remaining one, no matter how unbelievable it was the truth. The truth was that the third prince had run away. Jilin didn't believe that the third prince, who had been beaten to the point where he couldn't even stand up, could escape under his nose. That was impossible, but he still ran away. Someone helped him. Who was it? To be able to seize the opportunity to save the third prince under his dragon's breath without him noticing, thinking of this, a golden light flashed in Jilin's eyes and he suddenly sneered. He already knew, because this person was too easy to think of. There is only one person in the world who could do such a thing. Aisha. Other than her, no one else could do it. Even the Elven Queen couldn't save the third prince without him noticing. And if it was the Elven Queen, she wouldn't have acted so sneakily. That was a woman with many gods behind her. She could have easily defeated him and then left. So it could only be Aisha. It was Aisha who saved the third prince. Why? Why were you willing to take such a huge risk to save the third prince? To do a good deed? This isn't something you should do, right? Do you know how much determination I had to make in order to kill him? You saved someone from under my nose again. This is the second time. This matter isn't over. The third prince must die today. Chapter 301. Inside the Middle Empire, in an unknown forest, a red megalosaurus was hovering in the sky. From time to time, it would open its mouth and spit out a ball of fire, letting out a long roar. It showed its extremely irritable mood at this time. Jilin flew around the forest again and again. From day to night, he didn't stop for a moment. The two golden eyes released two huge pillars of light. He swept the forest again and again. With Jilin's ability and his golden eyes fully activated, he could see the ants crawling in the soil through the gaps between the leaves. Coupled with the photographic memory of the dragon race, after searching so many times, Jilin already knew this forest like the back of his hand. Perhaps Jilin had already memorized how many rabbit nests there were in this place. However, Jilin still had no clue about the whereabouts of the third prince. Jilin flew around the forest a few hundred times without any purpose, blowing countless cold wind in the sky. Only then did he finally calm down a little. Although only half a day ago, Jilin swore that the third prince must die today. But now, today was almost over, and there was still no trace of the third prince. It was all because of Aisha. When Jilin thought of this woman, he felt a bit of a headache. This woman really didn't play her cards according to common sense. She often did some completely unreasonable things in the world. It was as if the rules of this world could bind everyone except her. Jilin still didn't know how Aisha suddenly appeared in front of him, and how she turned herself into a human form. She also sent away many human legends in the Snow-Wind Empire in front of him. In the battle in the Snow-Wind Empire, if it wasn't for Aisha's intervention, Jilin could have killed all the human legends. Also, Aisha built a huge magic array in the Dwarf Kingdom and transported the entire Dwarf Kingdom to Red Dragon City. What Aisha had done was something that not even a legendary expert could do. But Aisha did it with her Tier 9 strength. He was just that unreasonable. Jilin thought about all the things that Aisha had done. In fact, he didn't have much hope of finding the third prince anymore. Perhaps Aisha had already brought the third prince to the other side of the continent while he was circling the forest. However, Jilin just couldn't figure out why Aisha would help the third prince. That woman was a classic example of someone who wouldn't do anything without benefits. My lord. A voice suddenly sounded in Jilin's mind. Jilin's eyes narrowed. There was only one person who called him that, Bat-Tel. Before him, the true owner of Mount Gerda. They were elemental creatures that had both the appearance of humans and the characteristics of demons. Legendary strength. In Jilin's opinion, this guy had a bright future. He was born and raised by the earth, and he was special enough. Most of the energy accumulated in Mount Gerda was used to nurture him. Jilin thought highly of him and let him guard his home. He even gave him an emergency way to contact him. There was only one order. Stay at home and watch. When the hero appears, tell me immediately. What's the matter? Jilin replied. A group of humans appeared in front of Red Dragon City. They call themselves the hero. They are making a ruckus outside the city. Jilin wasn't surprised at all. Jilin allowed Bat-Tel to contact him directly in his mind, but it was only limited to this matter. Other than that, he couldn't do anything else. So when Bat-Tel said the first sentence, Jilin knew what he meant. Another hero had come. Bat-Tel, this guy. Every time a human who called themselves a hero came, he would contact him like this. In the beginning, Jilin was very excited, thinking that he could finally meet the hero. After a few times, Jilin became a little indifferent. In the end, he was just perfunctory. Jilin finally understood that elemental creatures like Bat-Tel were brainless. They couldn't understand the habit of humans to boast. Heroes, you could just kill them directly. Jilin pondered for a moment and said, Master, are you not coming back? Is it worth it for me to rush back when you can kill them? Master is right. However, there's one more thing that I need to report to my lord. This communication method can only be used when the hero comes to contact me. That's what I told you before, right? Yes, but the Dwarf King said that if I don't tell you, he will die on the spot. Jilin was stunned. Only this time. Don't do it again. Speak. Oh, Master, the Dwarf King said that your sword will be ready soon. If you don't come back, it will be useless. There was a long silence. Jilin, who was flying in the air, felt that he was really messed up in the wind at this moment. You should have King said this earlier. Jilin's angry roar sounded like thunder in the sky. Jilin didn't hesitate anymore. He immediately turned around and shot toward the west. It was as if he was really faster than lightning. He turned into a flash of red light in the sky and disappeared. After a long time, in a hidden cave in the forest, a woman quietly poked her head out. She looked at the sky a few times. There was nothing but stars and the moon. It was pitch black. There was no trace of the red that the woman was afraid of. The woman immediately heaved a sigh of relief and returned to the cave. In the depths of the cave, a man in bright yellow clothes was lying on the ground. He looked dispirited and listless. It was the third prince. Jilin didn't expect that the third prince was in the place he had searched hundreds of times. He's finally gone. I can relax now, the woman said with a smile. The third prince tried his best to lift his eyelids. He glanced at the woman and the corners of his mouth twitched. He treated it as a smile. Thank you, Lady Aisha. Hey, you're now the human emperor. I don't deserve it. Aisha waved her hand. But how can you be so sure that it's me? You shouldn't have seen my true face. Lady Aisha must be joking. What do you not deserve? My grandfather was lucky enough to see your face once. He was shocked. According to seniority, you're an elder. The third prince said, As for your true face, it's easy to recognize. I've seen the crow on your shoulder before. I'm afraid there's no other crow in the world that has such intelligence. Xiaohei called out, as if she understood what the third prince said. Aisha chuckled. She didn't pursue whether the third prince was complimenting her or mocking her for being old. Is that the thing that helped us hide from Brother Long's search? The third prince asked as he looked at the crystal in Aisha's hand that was still glowing with a purple light. Yes, Aisha nodded. If it weren't for this thing, with Jilin's stubbornness, we wouldn't have been able to hide underground, let alone in this cave. Thank you, Lady Aisha. The third prince cupped his hands and bowed. I'm unable to repay you for saving my life. With your current status, shouldn't you be heavily rewarded for saving the emperor? Aisha teased. In front of Lady Aisha, which emperor dares to put on airs? The third prince said, You're the emperor. Of course you're different. Aisha looked at the third prince with some emotion. I didn't expect that the Middle Empire's, no, the entire human race's long-cherished wish would really come true. They actually managed to create the human sovereign. So what? The third prince shook his head. The power of the emperor is still no match for Brother Long. You just became the emperor. It's understandable that you're not used to it. But you really offended Jilin quite badly. Aisha looked at the third prince and said, I've never seen Jilin so stubborn about a human. In order to kill you, He's circled above our heads hundreds of times. If he finds out that we're hiding here, I'm sure even I will be killed by him. Your Majesty, people say that snatching food from the tiger's mouth is the most dangerous. But in order to save you, I'm snatching people from the dragon's mouth. I took such a big risk. You have to remember my contribution. Ha! The third prince shook his head and smiled. Lady Aisha, there's no need for such pleasantries. I know your character quite well. I just want to ask you one thing. Why did you take such a big risk to save me? As far as I know, you should be on Brother Long's side. There's no reason for you to help me deal with him. I'm innocent. Your Majesty. Aisha shouted exaggeratedly. Look at me. Do I look like someone on his side? He's a dragon. I'm a human. You're the emperor. I have to help you. The third prince understood a little. He was indeed a bit naive to ask Aisha's intentions directly. Lady Aisha, then I might as well change the question. What do you want me to do by saving my life? You are the human emperor. You could do whatever you want. The sky is high and the earth is wide. What can stop you? Aisha smiled. However, I have a trivial suggestion. I hope your Majesty can accept it. The third prince smiled. The main point was finally here. Please speak, Lady Aisha. The third prince said. Your Majesty, why do you think you couldn't defeat Jilin today? Because I just ascended the throne? Indeed, the power of the emperor is vast and boundless. As long as you can master it in the future, you'll definitely be able to fight Jilin. However, you'll only be able to fight one battle. What do you mean? You can fight, but you won't necessarily win. The power of the emperor can destroy the world. Its power is unparalleled. However, the power of the red disaster cannot be underestimated. The third prince nodded. This was nonsense. Who in the world would underestimate the power of the red disaster? But once your Majesty and Jilin fight to the death, it means that you're betting the fate of the entire human race. Betting all your assets, but you can't guarantee victory. Your Majesty, don't you think this gamble is a bit too big? There's no other way. No, there's a way. What way? The third prince has been in Spring Breeze House for many years. Haven't you seen people gamble? A brothel is not a place to gamble. However, I've seen gambling before. Back then, I had 2 gambling houses in the capital. My brothers gave them to me. You really love your people like your children. Well said. Please continue, Lady Aisha. Since you've seen gambling, you must have seen some gamblers bet all their assets. Some even bet their wives and children. For those gamblers, this is a game they must win. However, since it's a gamble, how can they win? Then, may I ask the third prince, what do those gamblers do when they don't have the confidence to win, but they still have to win? Cheat. The third prince's eyes widened slightly. He understood what Aisha meant. Aisha looked at the third prince in surprise. She didn't expect the dignified emperor of the Middle Empire, the current human emperor, to suddenly say such a dirty word. He even said cheat, as expected of someone who once ran a gambling house. Ahem. Aisha coughed twice to clear her thoughts. You're right. It's cheating. Now, the third prince is betting more than all the gamblers in the world combined. He must win. May I ask, third young master, are you going to do this? I'll do it. Third young master answered without hesitation. He, Liu, wasn't a hero of the world. He didn't care about morality. This was related to the inheritance of the human race and world peace. What was the point of being unscrupulous? No problem. The problem is how to do it? Cheating in the battle? Do you mean plotting? You can say that. Plotting? Poisoning? Sneak attack? Setting a trap? Do you think what you said will work on Jilin? Then tell me. Find someone to help. Who? Who can help? That's Brother Long. Even if I call all the legendary masters to help, it's just icing on the cake for Brother Long. Your analogy, isn't it? It's fine if I win. If I lose, Brother Long will kill my uncle and the others after killing me. Isn't that icing on the cake? Of course you can't find those people. Find someone who can defeat Jilin. Who? There's someone in the world who could defeat Brother Long. The Elf Queen. Who? The Elf Queen. Isn't that the legend of the Divine Dragon Empire? That's true. The Elf Queen. Where is she? The Elf Island, of course. How do I get there? I'll send you there. You know the way? Of course. I don't know her. You'll know her after chatting with her. What right does she have to chat with me? You're the human sovereign. The elf race has to give you face. At the same time, you can learn how to use the human sovereign's power from the elf queen. You said that Brother Long can't defeat her. Yes. In that case, the Red Calamity isn't a threat to the elf race. Since that's the case, why should she help me? The elf queen has a feud with the dragon race. A great feud, absolutely irreconcilable. Then why didn't she kill Brother Long? Because she can't leave the elf island. Then how can she help me? She can shoot arrows. She can shoot Jilin on the elf island. Usually, Jilin can dodge the elf queen's arrows, let alone from such a long distance. However, when you and Jilin are in the midst of a fierce battle, it's a different story. You're saying that I'm fighting Brother Long to help the elf queen attract Brother Long's attention? Then the elf queen will take the opportunity to sneak an attack and decide the outcome with one strike? That's right. You said you're asking her for help, but you're actually helping her. Helping each other and working together is a win-win situation. Everyone will be happy. The elf queen shouldn't refuse. Lady Aisha is indeed worthy of the title of the first witch in 1,000 years. I'm impressed. Your Majesty, you're too kind. However, there's still one thing that I don't understand. I hope Lady Aisha can enlighten me. Your Majesty, please speak. Brother Long has treated you well, but you're harming him like this. Do you really feel bad? Are you doing it or not? Yes. Chapter 302. Since your Majesty has already made up your mind, shall we head to Elven Island immediately? Aisha looked at the third prince and said, No. The third prince groaned in pain. I can't get up now, and my consciousness is starting to blur. Brother Long really went all out. It's fine. You have the providence of humans protecting you. You won't die, Aisha said. Then I have to make a trip back first. The third prince said, Many people saw my battle with Brother Long. They will definitely be worried about me. Besides, a country can't go a day without a ruler. I can't go to Elven Island like this. I have to take care of some things. With the hero king dead, it won't be easy. Then you have to be quick. I'll be waiting for you here in 3 days, Aisha said. Why are you in such a hurry? There's so many things. How can 3 days be enough? The third prince asked, perplexed. Your Majesty, Jilin wants to kill you now. Who knows when he will appear above your head? There is no place in this world that is safe for you, except for Elven Island. Only when you reach Elven Island will you be truly safe. So you have to be quick. Aisha said, Haha, I never expected that after ascending the throne, I would become a stray dog and have to hide everywhere. The third prince shook his head with a wry smile. It will get better in the future. Jilin is a creature that is extremely afraid of death. Now, you only have the possibility of threatening him, but you don't have the ability to hurt him. That is why he is in a hurry to kill you. He wants to eliminate the threat while it sprouts. However, when you grow up, even if there's only a 1% chance that you can perish together with Jilin, he will begin to fear you and will not easily meet you again. This is because Jilin feels that it is a loss to risk his life with a human like you who only has 100 years of life. I see. Even if I grasp the power of the human emperor, I only have a 1% chance of defeating Brother Long. You didn't hear what I said. I said we'll perish together. If you want to defeat him, I'm afraid your chances are 1 in 1,000. Then what's the point of playing? Isn't that a sure loss? It's true for you, but for Jilin, that 1% or 1 in 1,000 chance can't be ignored. The dragon race will never risk their lives for the sake of any other race. A red light streaked across the sky and landed in Red Dragon City. It was like a red comet with a long tail as it landed in Baylor's direction. The earth shook and dust filled the sky. The red-haired Jilin walked out of the smoke and dust. In order not to damage the buildings in Red Dragon City, Jilin would turn into his human form every time he came here. My lord. Battel immediately came over to greet him. It seemed that he had been waiting for a long time. What happened to those who call themselves brave ones? Are you still there? Or dead? Jilin asked immediately. Dead, Battel said. Oh, Jilin nodded and didn't say anything. In that case, the brave ones must be fake. Fake ones were not worth mentioning. However, for humans, those who could reach Red Dragon City were already strong. Just like Tiz had done back then, Crimson Lynn still asked, "How did they die? Did you do it?" "No, the dwarfs did it." Chi Lin blinked his eyes and turned his head to look at the countless cannons on the city walls. He thought that the humans who could reach here by themselves were at least at level 8. However, in front of the weapons of the dwarfs, they couldn't even touch the city wall. He finally had the face of a great villain. But that wasn't the point. The point was the sword. Thinking of this, Jilin flew into the sky and flew down from the largest crater of Mount Gerda. He flew directly to the Red Dragon Palace like a god descending from the sky or a devil coming to the world. "How is it?" Crimson Lynn didn't even raise his head when he directly asked. This was his world. The fire elements that filled the whole space told Jilin everything he wanted to know. Jilin had already sensed that the Dwarf King was here. Jilin looked up and saw the figure of the Dwarf King. But when Jilin saw the exaggerated expression of the Dwarf King, Jilin couldn't help but shudder. Jilin was stunned. This was the first time he was shocked by someone else's aura in this world. What kind of selflessness and fanaticism was that? His eyes were red and filled with crazy joy. Crimson Unicorn could see the crazy flame of recklessness in the Dwarf King's eyes. Jilin understood the determination of the Dwarf King. In order to forge the divine sword, he could sacrifice and give up everything, even if he was smashed to pieces, even if he destroyed the world. So this was what "if you don't go crazy, you won't survive" meant. You're finally back. The Dwarf King looked at Jilin with hatred, as if he wanted to turn Jilin into ashes. For some reason, Jilin suddenly felt a little weak in his heart. Jilin knew that the Dwarf King was blaming him for leaving at such a critical moment. Suddenly, in the lava, an unconcealable blazing light quietly lit up. It was obviously red, but that light was so eye-catching at this time. Jilin looked at that red light and only felt that his mind was connected, as if it was his own body. After all, it was a divine weapon made from his scales. The sky of Red Dragon City began to change dramatically. It was incomparably thick and heavy. Even the clouds of fire appeared in the sky without any warning. They covered the entire sky within the range of Mount Gerda. The sky was as red as blood. The red clouds were so thick that they seemed to be able to crush the earth. The people of the Saimai Empire saw this strange phenomenon and stopped to watch, pointing at the sky. In their view, the sky in the west had completely turned into the scene of the demon realm as described in the Holy Bible of Light. It was spectacular and terrifying. This was definitely not a natural scene. Could this be the descent of the demon realm? The people of the Saimai Empire thought in panic. The Dwarf King was naturally aware of the strange phenomenon in the sky. The Dwarf King looked up at the sky with an expression of excitement on his face. The Dwarf King looked at the sky and trembled with excitement. Then he suddenly collapsed on the spot. He raised his hands high and roared to the sky. Jilin involuntarily took a step back, like a chain reaction. The Dwarf King's roar began to spread slowly. 1 spread to 10, 10 spread to 100. Finally, all the people of the Dwarf Kingdom began to shout and roar. The dwarves of the Dwarf Kingdom all ran out of the underground city and ran under the red sky. They cheered and jumped for joy. They shouted loudly and hugged each other with all their strength. Some knelt on the ground on the spot and wailed. Some kept dancing and jumping on the spot. Most of them were shouting pointlessly and waving their hands at the red sky. Hundreds of thousands of dwarves roared together. The sound was earth-shattering. Not to say that the whole world could hear it, but it was no problem for all the creatures in the Red Dragon City to hear it. Jilin looked up at the sky and thought to himself, is this necessary? When an artifact is born, there will be a strange phenomenon in the world. Thunder and fire will follow. The ancestors did not lie to me. The Dwarf King looked at the sky and was so excited that he cried. The artifact was about to be completed. The dwarf race's long-cherished wish was finally fulfilled. What should I do now? Jilin was a little nervous because of the Dwarf King. He suddenly realized that this matter was not as simple as making a sword for himself. This is my first time forging an artifact. I'm not very clear about the specific details, but according to the description in the ancient books, you just need to drip a drop of blood in it later. When exactly? This artifact is made with the materials on your body. It is already connected to your blood. When the time comes, you will know. Is there any possibility of failure in the forging of the artifact until now? Jilin looked at the Dwarf King and asked curiously, "How is that possible? It's impossible for it to fail." The Dwarf King was suddenly like a cat whose tail was stepped on. He jumped up and stared at Jilin and shouted loudly. He believed that there was no possibility of failure in the forging of the artifact until now. But even so, the Dwarf King felt that Jilin should not say that. It was inauspicious. At this time, he should use all his means and leave no room for negotiation. He should use whatever he had, even if it was a metaphysical method that usually seemed absurd. Pray, don't think about the possibility of failure. Since there's no possibility of failure, why are you so nervous? Jilin frowned and looked at the Dwarf King. He had never seen anyone so nervous. It was to the point that he was infected. In Jilin's eyes, every pore of the Dwarf King was very stiff now, like a piece of wood. The reason why the Dwarf King was still able to move freely was that he was relying on his excitement to hold on. "Because I'm going to do something big later," the Dwarf King whispered. "Oh, what's the matter?" Jilin also whispered. "I'm going to die for the sword later. Hurry up and name this sword now." The Dwarf King's lush beard began to tremble. "Huh? What did you say?" Jilin bent down and put his ear close to the Dwarf King. He felt that he seemed to have heard wrongly. "I said, hurry up and name the sword." The Dwarf King glared. "Not this sentence." "I heard this sentence clearly. I asked the previous sentence." Jilin said, "I said, I'm going to die for the sword." The Dwarf King glanced around and found that the dwarves who were in charge of helping here were far away at this time. Then he lowered his voice and whispered to Jilin. Jilin sucked in a breath of cold air and scratched his head. This was his habitual action in the human world and anthropology. It had a miraculous effect in relieving shock, depression, and other emotions. It could only be done in human form, because his original body did not have such a thing as hair. Jilin calmed down. "Well, I know a lot of human stories. Staya also told me a lot of human common sense. I also know a little about dying for the sword. I just don't know if the sword you're talking about is the same as the one I'm thinking about." "You think it's the sword sacrifice?" The Dwarf King squinted at Jilin. "It's about jumping down later." Jilin pointed to the magma that was glowing red. "Then what we're talking about is the same thing." The Dwarf King nodded affirmatively. "You." Jilin widened his eyes and looked at the Dwarf King. For a moment, he did not know what to say. Is it necessary? Is it worth it? As soon as these words came out, Jilin felt that something was wrong. These words were a little familiar. He seemed to have been saying them a lot recently. "It's worth it," the Dwarf King answered without hesitation. Jilin closed his eyes and thought that these words sounded familiar too. The dwarf race can't do without you. The dwarf race is not like the human race. We can do without a king. If you die so easily, will you be able to face your ancestors? My ancestors will be proud of me. This is a divine weapon. Some of my ancestors only managed to forge an ordinary weapon before they died. I'm much better than them. Life is precious. It's not easy to live once. It's a bit of a loss to die like this. Can you show some respect? Life is precious, but it will eventually pass away. There's an end to it. I can't live forever. So what I can do is to choose a worthy way to die. I'll die sooner or later, so I might as well choose a more awesome way to die. This is the way I think is worthy and awesome. Don't stop me." Jilin had nothing to say because he felt that what the Dwarf King said was very reasonable. At this moment, the dazzling red light began to become brighter and brighter. Jilin felt that the divine weapon was slowly rising from the magma. The Dwarf King said that the time to drip blood was almost here, and the time for the Dwarf King to die for the sword had arrived. The Dwarf King took out several treasures of the dwarf race from his body and threw them on the ground casually. Then he began to sprint towards the magma. Jilin was really a little dumbfounded. He had seen people looking for death, but he had never seen someone looking for death so decisively, so impatiently, and so unhesitatingly. Looking at the Dwarf King's charging posture, it would be impossible to stop him without one or two legendary masters. Hey, if you run a few steps faster, you'll lose your life. Why don't you hesitate and struggle? Dying for the sword. Does this thing really have any meaning? If you die, can the sword become more powerful? Can you become a sword spirit and coexist with the sword to obtain a different kind of eternal life? No way. That's all human superstitions, right? You can't believe it, right? The dignified Dwarf King, don't be so impulsive. Jilin took a step forward and came to the Dwarf King in an instant. He stretched out his hand casually and held the Dwarf King down. The Dwarf King's galloping like 10,000 horses came to an abrupt end. Even though the Dwarf King's desire to die was extremely resolute and the momentum of his sprint was unstoppable, but in the end, he could not break through the dragon's obstruction. When Jilin thought about it, even a landslide and a tsunami would have to stop, let alone a Dwarf King. What are you doing? Let me go. The Dwarf King was taken aback and then shouted loudly. The opportunity to die for the sword was also fleeting. When the divine weapon completely rose from the magma, he would have no chance. The Dwarf King's loud shout attracted the attention of the dwarves standing in the distance. The dwarves looked over here one after another, and their faces changed in an instant. They only saw Jilin holding the Dwarf King down. They thought that Jilin saw that the divine weapon was about to be cast and wanted to get rid of the donkey after it had outlived its usefulness. Without waiting for the dwarves to react, Jilin grabbed the Dwarf King and threw him into the pile of dwarves. He shouted to the frightened dwarves, "Your king wants to die for the sword. Hold him down." The dwarves were stunned, and their movements suddenly stagnated for a moment. Their faces changed twice again. Previously, they were shocked, but now they were scared. The matter of dying for the divine weapon was not often seen in the dwarf race, and they should have thought of it. But the divine weapon was about to be cast, and they were so excited that they forgot about it for a while. Don't be so anxious to die. Witness the birth of the divine weapon with your own eyes. Jilin looked at the Dwarf King falling from the air and said with a smile. Chapter 303. Plop. The Dwarf King, who was thrown away by Jilin, landed with a loud crash. In just a moment, the Dwarf King jumped up with a nimble movement that was very inconsistent with his round figure. This scene was undoubtedly a surprise to everyone. However, even so, the Dwarf King could only stop here. This was because the moment he stood up, there were already dozens of powerful palms pressing down on his body, pressing him down again. None of the dwarves present were weak. Some were even stronger than the Dwarf King. So no matter how hard the Dwarf King struggled, it was useless. The Dwarf King was pinned to the ground by more than a dozen elite dwarves. It looked like an assassin who failed to assassinate the emperor. Only one dwarf was missing at this moment to ask, "Your Majesty, why are you rebelling? Let me go." The Dwarf King was still struggling and roaring. "What are you doing? Do you want to die for me? This is the supreme glory of the dwarf race. I will not give it to you." All the dwarves who were holding down the Dwarf King were silent at this time. It was not that they did not have this thought deep in their hearts. Jilin looked at the silent dwarves and shook his head with a complicated mood. Forging a sword was a top priority for the dwarf race that was comparable to the whole world. But in Jilin's view, it was just for fun. It was just a whim of his. Divine artifacts, this sort of thing, were really dispensable to Jilin. After all, he had never heard of the dragon race using weapons. Their claws and teeth were the most powerful artifacts in the world. Their scales were the sturdiest armor. The reason why Jilin wanted a sword was purely because he saw how cool Tiz looked when he was charging at him with a sword. That was why he had the idea of getting a sword. Later, by chance, he met the dwarf race. The two sides hit it off. Jilin wanted to play with a sword, and the dwarf race needed a flame with a very high temperature. This was nothing but Jilin's playful attitude. The dwarf race responded with the awareness of death. This made Jilin feel a little guilty. "I just want to get a toy. Do you have to be so serious? Sacrificing himself for the sword? What a fool. However, since you put in so much effort for me, then I have to be more serious." A huge red sword engraved with complicated patterns rose from the magma. The Dwarf King stopped struggling, and his eyes became dull. The opportunity to die for the sword and merge with the divine artifact had been completely lost. The dwarves slowly let go of the Dwarf King. No one was holding him down anymore, but the Dwarf King was still lying on the ground, motionless, as if he was dead. Jilin walked to the front of the huge sword and gently stroked the blade with his finger. A small wound appeared on Jilin's fingertip. Jilin's body was indestructible. Even if his human body was not as sturdy as his real body, it was still not to be underestimated. Even though the sword was made with Jilin's teeth and nails, the sharpness of the sword still surprised Jilin. The dwarf race was really amazing. Jilin forced a drop of red blood from the wound and pressed it on the sword. In an instant, the light shone brightly in thousands of auspicious colors. A huge red beam of light shot straight into the sky from the crater of the volcano. The people of the Simi Empire, looking from afar, thought that a volcano had erupted. But after looking at it a little more, they knew that it was not, because no volcano could erupt so high. The burning clouds, which were as red as blood and as thick as the night sky, began to surge slowly. Muffled thunder sounded in the clouds. Then an incomparably thick bolt of lightning struck down. It fell directly into the crater of the volcano above the Red Dragon Palace and struck Jilin's body. The elites of the dwarf race dragged the Dwarf King and retreated in panic. This was the power of the heavens, who would not be afraid. Although the lightning bolt was clearly aimed at Jilin or the sword, it was clear that it was aimed at Jilin. But there was another saying that the power of the heavens was unpredictable. There was no telling when the thunderbolt would strike the wrong way. It was too dangerous for them to be so close, so it was better to stay away. The thunderbolts continued to strike, one after another. In the end, they seemed to connect into one. The dwarves retreated further and further, and finally retreated to the entrance of the Red Dragon Palace. From afar, they watched Jilin being struck by lightning. Bathed in the thunderstorm, the dwarves looked at each other and only felt cold sweat running down their backs. This scene was too frightening. The ancestors said that when a vision descended, wind and thunder accompanied it. Was it not an exaggeration? In the end, no one knew how many thunderbolts fell. The dwarves were so scared that they were not in the mood to count. Jilin's figure appeared from the thunderbolt, and there were charred marks all over his body. It seemed that even he could not be unscathed in such a power of the heavens. The red clouds began to recede. Jilin held the giant's sword with a backhand grip. The red light emitted by the giant's sword instantly disappeared. Heaven and earth returned to normal. However, under the volcano, it seemed that two megalosaurus opened their eyes at the same time and quietly woke up. Jilin's golden eyes had never been so bright. They were like two small suns that no one dared to look at them directly. How about the name of this sword be the Fire and Thunder Sword? Jilin raised the giant sword high and looked at the Dwarf King as he spoke. I don't think so. Even though the Dwarf King could not open his eyes, he still said firmly. He could roughly guess Jilin's thoughts. When the sword was formed, there was fire and thunder, so it was called the Fire and Thunder Sword. Then what do you think it should be called? This naming right belongs to you. Jilin appeared to be very magnanimous at this moment. How about the Dragon Scale Sword? It's not much better than me, but it's fine. Beast King, the sword, is it formed? Singh suddenly appeared at the entrance of the Red Dragon Palace and looked at Jilin eagerly. Why are you only here now? Jilin asked. He thought that with such a big commotion, Singh would have arrived long ago. The thunder and lightning were fierce, and we orcs are naturally afraid of thunder and lightning, so we did not dare to approach, Singh said. Beast King, are you okay? Of course I'm fine. Jilin smiled. I know what you're going to say. It just so happens that I also want to try the sword. After Jilin finished speaking, he suddenly transformed into a megalosaurus, and the sword also became bigger. It was not at all out of place in the huge Jilin's hand. Jilin held the giant's sword, flapped his wings, and flew into the sky, flying straight towards the south. Not long after, an endless translucent barrier appeared in front of Jilin's eyes. This barrier seemed to cut off heaven and earth. It went straight from the ground to the sky. It completely separated the wilderness and Mount Gerda. This barrier had been here for thousands of years, as if it was a true natural barrier, and no one could pass through this barrier. In the past, Jilin did not know what this was. But now he knew. This was one of the links in the sealing god formation that the Water Dragon King had participated in building, although the Water Dragon King had repeatedly told him to protect the god sealing array and even wanted him to repair the wind calming array in the Calm Wind Pass. He had no choice. According to the Water Dragon King, this barrier must not be destroyed. But who cares? Who would listen to the words of a disgrace to the dragon race? Jilin grinned ferociously. He used all his strength to swing this sword. There was a loud bang. Heaven and earth resonated. The red barrier was broken. The barrier between the volcano and the wilderness disappeared. The wind and sand of the wilderness blew to the volcano, and the sulfur poisonous gas that filled the volcano all year round drifted to the wilderness. But fortunately, it did not drift too far. On the Elf Island, the red and yellow god beads worshipped in the temple shattered at the same time. At this point, the 5 god beads guarded by the Elf Island were completely shattered, and none of them were intact. Suddenly, a breeze blew. The elven queen silently appeared beside the altar. The queen tapped her forehead with her slender fingers, looking down at the 5 god beads in silence. Was everything about to begin? At the foot of Cloud Cover Mountain, everyone had returned from the peak of Cloud Cover Mountain to the foot of the mountain. The Sacred King, the Iron Blood King, the War King, the Sword Saint, and the Pope. Everyone was waiting here, and no one left. They were all busy every day, and they felt that the whole day was not enough for them. They did not have any time to waste, but they were still waiting here. There was only anxiety in their eyes, but there was no trace of impatience. In terms of patience, these big shots all had it. It only depended on whether it was worth it or not. The person they were waiting for was worth it. The Golden King, His Majesty the Human Emperor. If he doesn't come back in another 4 hours, then let's go. After waiting for a long time, the Iron Blood King spoke first. Everyone turned to look at the Iron Blood King. There was no trace of blame in their eyes, only admiration. The Iron Blood King was the first among them to take the initiative to face reality. The Iron Blood King did not mean that he was not willing to wait for another 4 hours. Instead, if His Majesty the Human Emperor did not return in another 4 hours, then there was no need to wait any longer. He would definitely be killed by the Red Disaster. This also meant that the hope of the human race was gone again. Everyone was silent for a moment, then nodded one after another. They agreed with the Iron Blood King's judgment. If it were anyone else, they wouldn't even wait. Just as everyone nodded, a rustling sound suddenly came from the jungle. The Sword Saint looked in that direction, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. The others looked in that direction with vigilance. After a while, the third prince, holding the 9 cauldron sword in his hand, walked out of the jungle. He looked extremely haggard. The emperor's clothes, which used to be extremely majestic, were now tattered. His robe had become short, and the bead curtain on the crown had become incomplete. It was very miserable. But even so, even though the third young master looked a little down and out, everyone was still overjoyed and surrounded him in an instant. They asked all kinds of questions at once. The third prince didn't hear a single one of them clearly. It wasn't until the third prince sat down on the ground that everyone finally calmed down. The Sword Saint walked up to the third prince, sat down in front of the third prince, and asked with a burning gaze, "The Red Disaster is dead?" The third prince was surprised, then shook his head. "Then you defeated him, and he ran away?" The Sword Saint asked again. The third prince understood a bit, but still shook his head. "Then the two of you were evenly matched? Did you agree to fight again next time?" The Sword Saint asked again. The third prince still shook his head. "Then how did you come back?" The Sword Saint was a bit anxious. "I lost, so I ran back," the third prince answered. Everyone was shocked. To be able to escape from the Red Disaster is already not bad, the War King said. The third prince looked at the War King and chuckled without saying anything. He thought to himself, "If not for Aisha helping me, I would have been beaten to death by Brother Long. How do you feel? Do you have a chance of winning?" The Sword Saint asked. Today is my first time using human sovereign's power, so I'm a bit unfamiliar with it. When I become more familiar with it in the future, I might be able to fight, the third prince said. That's good. The Sword Saint nodded. What should we do about the Hero King? The Iron Blood King suddenly asked. The emperor of an empire died in a foreign country. This was a big deal. Furthermore, it happened during this critical period when all of humanity needed to unite. If the Divine Dragon Empire declared war on the other empires at this time, it would be troublesome. Have the Hero King's ashes been collected? The third prince didn't know what to do, so he could only ask this question. Red Calamity did it. Nothing was left behind, the Pope said. The third prince frowned as he looked at the Pope. The Pope's words angered him so much that the roots of his teeth itched. He thought to himself, you and Aisha are a match made in heaven. Even your mouth is so sarcastic. Teacher, what should we do about this? The third prince looked at Ouyang-ju. Let's think about it at length. Ouyang-ju's answer was just as roguish. It wasn't that Ouyang-ju was being perfunctory. Rather, there was simply no solution to this problem. Report. Urgent report. Suddenly, a pitch-black figure appeared in front of the third young master with a black envelope in his hands. This figure knelt on one knee and offered the Golden King a letter of faith. When the Golden King saw the newcomer, he sucked in a breath of cold air. The reason was none other than First Shadow, the leader of the Shadow Guard, a legendary expert. What kind of urgent report would require First Shadow to personally deliver it? The Golden King didn't know because there had never been such a big incident. Even if someone in the Middle Empire rebelled and surrounded the Imperial Palace while he wasn't around, First Shadow wouldn't be the one to deliver the letter. The Golden King suddenly didn't want to accept this letter because he felt that even if he read it, he probably wouldn't be able to solve it. If he asked his teacher, he was afraid that he would still get the same, let's think about it at length. But in the end, the Golden King braced himself and took the envelope. He opened it and began to read the unique black letter of the Shadow Guard in fear. Because he was the Golden King, there were some responsibilities that he couldn't escape from. The fate of countless people was on his shoulders. He had just fought with the Megalosaurus and was lucky enough to escape, but he couldn't rest immediately. Being the emperor really wasn't easy. The third prince thought silently in his heart. After complaining in his heart, the Golden King began to calm down and read the letter seriously. This was information personally delivered by a legendary expert, so he had to take it seriously. As the Golden King read, he frowned and breathed heavily. When the others saw his expression, they also became a little nervous. After a long time, the Golden King finally looked up and swept his gaze across the faces of the other emperors. There are two pieces of news now, one good and one bad. Take one if you want to hear it. Everyone just looked at him, but no one bothered with him. The good news is that we don't have to explain the Hero King's death anymore. The bad news is that the Divine Dragon Empire has been destroyed. Chapter 304. There was dead silence. No one spoke in the forest. What did the Golden King just say? It seemed like those two sentences were related by cause and effect. The empire was destroyed. The War King shouted. The Iron Blood King kept opening and closing his mouth. It seemed like he wanted to say something, but because he couldn't articulate well, he couldn't say anything at this critical moment. The Golden King licked his cracked lips and nodded. How is that possible? The War King couldn't believe it. The Divine Dragon Empire was the same as the Nanshin Empire. They were both great empires with thousands of years of history. How could it be destroyed just like that? Is the news reliable? The Sacred King asked. He didn't want to believe that this was true. He stood up and glared at the Shengming King. The Sacred King sighed and didn't say anything. That's right. How could the news sent by a legendary expert and the leader of the Shadow Guards be fake? What is going on? The Iron Blood King finally asked. In short, an organization called the Red Dragon Sect started a rebellion and won in the end. The third prince scratched his head. Impossible. The Divine Dragon Empire has Dragon Knights. There shouldn't be any organization in the Empire that can fight against that kind of power, the Sacred King said. The Divine Dragon Empire doesn't have Dragon Knights anymore, Stias said. Everyone was in an uproar when they heard this. How could the Divine Dragon Empire not have Dragon Knights? What do you mean? The War King asked Staya. All the dragon knights in the Divine Dragon Empire have been called away by Jilin, Staya said. He can control flying dragons, the War King asked with a frown. That's natural, Staya said. The Saint of Light is right, the Golden King said. The Middle Empire knows about this. The flying dragons suddenly lost control and flew toward the west. Because of this, I specially sent a golden spaceship to help the Divine Dragon Empire resist the Marine race and guard Pingfeng Pass. But I never thought that Brother Long would miscalculate. Even if that's the case, even if the Divine Dragon Empire doesn't have any Dragon Knights, they still have their own army. The rebel army is just a local armed force or a peasant uprising. How could they possibly capture the capital? The warlord asked. The Golden King sneered. He did not deny that the warlord looked down on the peasant uprising. He said indifferently, the leader of the Red Dragon sect is Flay. They believe in the Red Calamity. The intense conversation suddenly fell into silence again. Since that was the case, everything made sense. With a legendary champion leading the way, seizing the opportunity to take down a half-dead empire would not be too unbelievable. No, the Divine Dragon Empire lost its Dragon Knights, lost Calm Wind Pass, and was invaded by the Oceanic race. Saying that he was half-dead was an understatement. In the end, the Divine Dragon Empire relied too much on the strength of the Dragon Knights. How confident are you in defeating the Red Calamity in a few days? The warlord asked as he looked at the Golden King. Not even 10%. The Golden King shook his head. However, at the very least, it will prevent him from easily invading our human territories. That's good. The warlord nodded. Then he stood up and performed a cupped fist salute to everyone. Since that is the case, I'll take my leave first. I still have many things to deal with. If you need help with the Divine Dragon Empire's matters, just ask. Got it. The Golden King smiled. Take care, warlord. Everyone, take care. The warlord picked up his spear and turned to leave. The Iron Blood Monarch nodded at everyone and left without saying a word. The Sagely Monarch clearly wanted to leave as well. However, the Golden King stopped him. Sagely Monarch, please wait. Holy Daughter, please wait. I have a favor to ask of the Holy Daughter. Staya turned to look at the Golden King. The third prince, what is it? I hope that you can visit Brother Long when you return to the Saimai Empire. The third prince cupped his hands and bowed. When the Sagely Monarch heard this, the veins on his forehead bulged. His eyes narrowed into slits. The cold light in his eyes was as sharp as a knife. It was as if he wanted to turn the third prince into minced meat. His daughter had just returned from a dangerous place. Could it be that he wanted her to walk back on her own? Father, Staya glanced at the Sagely Monarch. I believe that the third prince must have something extremely important that he wants me to convey to Jilin, right? Holy Daughter, you guessed right. That is indeed the case. The third prince cupped his hands and bowed. Although he felt that Brother Long would not harm Staya, he still felt guilty. The Sagely Monarch's cold gaze instantly softened. As the ruler of a country, since the Golden King had already lowered himself so much, he could not say anything more. Therefore, the Sagely Monarch snorted coldly and turned his head away, no longer looking at him. What is it? The third prince, please speak, Staya said. Holy Daughter, you are so righteous. The third prince bowed even lower. Actually, when I was fighting with Brother Long, I had a conversation with him. It was about the Orc Wasteland. Oh, what did you talk about? Staya asked with a frown. Therefore, the third prince told Staya everything about his conversation with Jilin. Staya listened with a serious expression. She looked at the third prince for a long time without speaking. Why are you looking at me like that? The third prince asked curiously. Oh, nothing. Staya came back to her senses. Your Majesty Golden King, you are right. War cannot give any race a good life. No matter if it is the winner or the loser, it is the same. However, the third prince seems to have neglected a problem. What problem? The third prince was stunned. War is cruel because it comes with a huge price. Everyone who wants to start a war has to consider whether the price is worth it. Therefore, people are very cautious and will not start a war easily. I think the third prince knows this very well. Yes. The third prince nodded. But the problem is, the one who wants to start this war is Jilin. And the ones who will bear the price are the orcs, humans, and dwarves. Although Jilin is the orc king, you might not care, Staius said. Saintus, are you saying that my conditions are not persuasive in Brother Long's eyes at all? He doesn't care if the orcs have a better life or if they have enough food to eat and warm clothes to wear. Yes, Staius thought for a while. You can understand it that way. Saintus, please tell Brother Long that if he wants to fight, I will definitely accompany him. However, the next time we fight, it might not be like this time, where it will be a life and death battle. However, if Brother Long doesn't fight, then the humans are willing to form an alliance with the Red Camp. Everything can be discussed. I hope Brother Long will think about it carefully. The third prince thought for a while and said, Yes, Your Majesty. I will convey Your Majesty's will, Staya said in a low voice. Okay. The third prince smiled and nodded. At the same time, he waved at a scholar in a green robe. It was one of the 108 scribes. Simply put, he was here to make up the numbers. When the scholar saw that the Golden King summoned him, he instantly felt flattered. He ran in front of the Golden King and wanted to kneel on the ground and worship the human emperor. However, the third prince didn't even give him the chance to do so. As soon as he got close, third young master reached out and snatched a pure gold tortoise from his arms. It was a sacrificial item used to worship the heavens. The third prince casually handed the golden turtle to Staya. As a messenger of the human race, you should at least bring a gift. Otherwise, it would be rude, the third prince said. I understand. Staya nodded. She took the golden turtle and put it into the sacred book of Light's dimension. May the heavens bless you, Saintus. The third prince bowed with his hands. No. Staya smiled and bowed with the Church of Light. May the God of Light bless the human race. Saintus, take care. Emperor, take care. Saintus, please wait. The third prince seemed to have suddenly thought of something and raised his hand to stop Staya. Staya turned around and asked in confusion, What is it, the third prince? That? I heard that when the Saintus was with Brother Long, you taught Brother Long many things. Brother Long's understanding of the human race was basically taught by the Saintus? No. Chilin's understanding of the human race is based on what I've seen with my own eyes. However, I did teach him some things. For example, the human culture and principles. Why is the third prince asking about this? I'm ignorant. I have something to ask the Saintus. The third prince doesn't need to be humble. Please speak. Which country is Qin Shi Huang? Saintus, you don't know? Then, who is the hegemon of Western Shu? Where is Western Shu? Saintus, you don't know? Then who is Liu Bei? The third prince said goodbye to Staya and brought the group of people back to the heaven worship camp. The camp wasn't very luxurious. It was really just a military tent. The emperor's tent was just a little bigger than the others. The emperor of the Middle Empire cared about his reputation the most. His food and clothing were all well regulated and extravagant. Even when the emperor went on a tour, he had to spend money to build a palace that would only last for a few days. However, when it came to the heaven worship ceremony, he would put away all his extravagance. This was to show the heaven that he was a thrifty, simple, and dedicated to the people good emperor. In the end, the emperor of the Middle Empire had always been deceiving the heaven worship ceremony. The so-called heaven, in the eyes of the royal family of the Middle Empire, was just an existence that could be used and deceived. If the Middle Empire really respected the heaven, how would they dare to boast shamelessly and call themselves the emperor? How would they dare to steal the throne of the emperor? Surrounded by a group of people, the third prince returned to his own heaven worship ceremony camp. Only Sword Saint, Ouyang Ju, and Ing Yi followed him into his tent. Ing Yi, invite the prime minister over, the third prince said before he even sat down. Ing Yi paused, nodded, then turned into a black shadow and disappeared. For a heaven worship ceremony like this, as the leader of the officials, the prime minister had to follow. Uncle, teacher, please take a seat. The third prince casually greeted them, then closed his eyes and took a few deep breaths. His face was solemn. He looked completely different from when he was talking to Staya just now. Sword Saint and Ouyang Ju looked at each other, but didn't say anything. The third prince was already the Golden King, and now he was the emperor. In terms of combat power, even Sword Saint was no match for him. He was no longer the kid he used to be. If he had something to say, he would say it when he wanted to. If he didn't want to say it, no one could do anything about it. After a while, a series of hurried footsteps came from outside the tent. Zhuge Zhang hurriedly lifted the tent curtain and walked in. "Your Majesty, the Prime Minister is here." The third prince opened his eyes. "Please get up. This is not the Wuji Palace. The Prime Minister doesn't need to be so polite. Manners can't be ignored. Why is Your Majesty looking for the old minister?" Zhuge Zhang asked. The third prince was stunned. He didn't expect the Prime Minister to ask such a question. He looked at Yi. "Your Majesty, the secret letter of the Shadow Guard can only be seen by Your Majesty and those who have Your Majesty's permission," Yi said. "Oh." The third prince nodded to show that he understood. Then he took out a piece of black paper and handed it to Zhuge Zhang. "Prime Minister, look at this. Be careful. Don't get too excited. This is..." The Prime Minister took it with both hands. After glancing at it, his eyes widened in shock. He glanced at the third prince. The third prince nodded at him. He had always heard that Zhuge Zhang could read 10 lines at a glance. He didn't believe it before, but now he believed it. He had such a big reaction just by glancing at it. Zhuge Zhang looked at Sword Saint, Yi, and Ouyang-ju. In the end, he still looked at the letter. This time, the Prime Minister looked at it very seriously. He didn't read 10 lines at a glance anymore. "Your Majesty? This needs to be discussed at length." Zhuge Zhang's voice was trembling. Suddenly encountering such a huge event that had never happened in 1,000 years, anyone would find it a little difficult to bear. The Divine Dragon Empire had fallen. The balance of the 5 great empires had been broken. A storm was about to sweep across the continent. It would be a new era. Before the arrival of the new era, the Middle Empire needed to grasp the direction and seize the opportunity. For this, they needed a long-term plan. The third prince shook his head. He understood the Prime Minister's meaning, but now wasn't the time to do such things. He knew that the Prime Minister's long-term plan was different from the Ouyang-ju's long-term plan. Ouyang-ju's intention was to drag things out, while Zhuge Zhang's intention was to plan for the future of the empire. Yes, the Prime Minister was right. With the Divine Dragon Empire's fall, the human race would definitely experience a huge upheaval. A great chaos was about to descend. Taking advantage of the chaos to profit was the basic quality of every emperor, general, minister, and noble. Actually, when the third prince first saw the letter, his thoughts were similar to the Prime Minister's. However, the third prince had already calmed down. He knew very well that the human race was about to be shaken. However, with his brother Long standing in front of the human race, he really didn't have the time to care about something like the Divine Dragon Empire's fall. The Prime Minister was also stunned when he saw the third prince shake his head. "Since Your Majesty doesn't want to profit from this, why did you show this to the old minister?" Zhuge Zhang clearly understood the emperor's thoughts. "What I mean is that the human race is currently in a very dangerous situation. We should take this seriously. Now that the Divine Dragon Empire is destroyed, the next one might be our Middle Empire. We should make some plans." Zhuge Zhang glanced at the others and saw that they were all looking at the Golden King. He felt that something was wrong. "It looks like Your Majesty has already made a decision. May I know if you can make it known?" Zhuge Zhang asked. "I called you here to discuss this matter with you," the Golden King said. "I want to cultivate the power of the human sovereign and leave the Middle Empire for some time." In that instant, the entire room fell silent. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.